It is Wednesday, and it is time for BRAP. We've got a big show for our listeners this evening. Big shout out to everyone in the live chat, by the way. Thank you all for stopping by and hanging out with us. Really appreciate it. Please hit that like button. I'm actually going to drop a link in the live chat right now. Please retweet the link on Twitter's, on your favorite social media platform. Like I said, we got a really big show. Lot to talk about. Still having conversations. I call it the fallout of the Activision acquisition, or I'm sorry, the acquisition of Activision by Microsoft a week ago. I have two returning guests that are going to provide some tremendous insight and thoughts into some of the more things we've learned more recently as it relates to Call of Duty exclusivity. Phil Spencer just actually kind of spoke to the PlayStation fan base more recently. And then kind of a question that's been going around. Is Microsoft creating another monopoly with Xbox? I've seen that term thrown around loosely, I would say, in my opinion. So we'll talk about that and maybe some other random topics as well. So please, everyone, hit that like button. If you're new to the show, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you are alerted when we go live. Now, I want to introduce this first gentleman here. He's making a return to BRAP. It's been, we were talking before we went live, and I was saying to him, I was like, I think it's been a couple years since you've last been on, but this gentleman probably needs no introduction. I've known him since 2013. He's actually one of the first individuals I connected with on gaming Twitter. We were talking about that and how so much has changed in the last, 9 years. And I want to give a warm welcome. We got Tim Dog back on BRAP. Tim, welcome back to BRAP, man. It's long overdue, man.
Yeah, man. You were always a gentleman. I remember talking with you and certain other people, and I'm really happy to be here. You've always been a really nice guy and played the Xbox a couple of times, and through the years, it's just crazy that it's 9 years that we've been talking about every story or whatever. We have our community, and it's just nice, and I'm happy to be here. Panel is awesome with the Mr. Hogue Law. Very excited that he's here, but I'm happy to be on the show. We got a really good subject here that we can go into detail about, and man, just 9 years. It just blows my mind that it seems like yesterday if you really think about it.
Yeah, no, it does seem like yesterday, and it's really cool because we were. I mean, you remember in 2013, it was like the whole Xbox DRM thing and the conversations we were having on Twitter back then, and it's kind of cool because it's been a complete 180. I mean, we know how last generation went for Microsoft, and this is just a completely different story, which is just fascinating, I think, to see. So, but yeah, Tim, great to have you back on, man. I really appreciate you joining us this evening. And then we also have, Tim mentioned Hogue Law. We have Hogue back on BRAP. It's been a little while since we've had Hogue, but Hogue, you have had a lot to say about some of the topics we're going to talk about. You've been on quite a few shows, kind of doing a tour of shows, if you will. But we really do always appreciate your insight. And by the way, I did drop a link to Hogue's YouTube channel, so please check that out if you have a chance to, and consider subscribing to his channel. But Hogue, welcome back to BRAP, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and thank you for putting up with me. I feel like I've been talking all week. Last Tuesday when I woke up, I had something like 570 emails that got sorted into my virtual legality and gaming adjacent talking points folder. And that's when I knew something was up, that somebody was either mad at me for something I'd said at YouTube that got a little viral, or that some major news item had happened. And ever since Tuesday morning, I've been chatting with a lot of folks, and certainly you asked me to come on. I wanted to be here. I want to go to every place that was talking to me before, and I am thrilled to be having this conversation. I love BRAP. It's
thank you.
It's chill. It's the gaming lounge of podcasts. I enjoy it here.
Thank you. Yes, we behind the scenes we smoke cigars and sip on fine bourbon.
It feels a little bit like that. I like it. I like it.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. We also got my man live from South Florida, Eric Jackson. What's up, E?
Yo, what's going on, everybody? How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing well,
doing great.
man.
Good.
Nice to
All
see
right.
you.
Hey, Tim, how you doing, man? Hogue,
How
how's
you
it going?
doing?
Hey,
Been a
I'm
E,
long time,
fantastic.
Tim.
hey, E, I just want to say that that Apple Watch you have, that's kind of like both of ours.
We just keep it down in my house.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, man. But
What's going on?
great to have you on, man. Really looking forward to kind of to talking about some of these topics tonight, man. But look, let's just kind of jump into this because it's been a week since the announcement of Microsoft acquiring Activision, which shook the foundation of the gaming industry. This is probably the biggest announcement I think in the history of gaming, right? I think the panel would probably agree on that. So now that the dust is kind of settled, and I want to go to you first, Tim, because you kind of have your ears close to the ground. You do talk to some of the folks over at Microsoft on occasion. Now that the dust has settled, Tim, like what do you like now that you've kind of digested this thing and maybe thought about it a little bit more? What are your thoughts now today? I mean, have your thoughts about the merger, or I should say not the merger, but the acquisition of Activision Blizzard, has that changed at all since last week for you?
I honestly, I kind of been feeling the same. There's a lot to that we're going to go into and dig into, but I can tell you that I had known something was up last month because Redmond usually, is a place in December where everything shuts down, and they refer to it as to recharge the batteries. A lot of vacations are scheduled. I think you saw a little bit of that with 343. They were still working, and they worked a little bit of overtime in December, but it was very active, and like I sensed something was up. So to be honest, I would never think in a million years it would be that. I thought it was something like possibly an acquisition, maybe something gets solidified, but when it happened, it was completely a shock. And had to digest a lot of it. I think though, from last week to this week, I think that I've realized a couple of things. Like I think Phil and his team and a lot of people at Microsoft are kind of in a shutdown mode, meaning they're not going to answer questions about this stuff, especially from fans or stuff like that. And I even put it on a tweet. I wouldn't ask them because they're in the middle of this whole thing with this has to go through. So I realize that it's going to be a long time going, and I think that. Even though it was a joy, it was a nice week for Xbox. I think or a very big week. I do think that there were things attached to it that are not really the most comfortable, and then I think that's what we're going to go into this show. And we have an expert in hog law and stuff like that. But yeah, I honestly feel they're going to have a tough fight on their hands. But I think they have. The way they looked at it, the way they went about it, with the long time, April of 2023, that they realize this is going to be a fight. And, I think that we got a lot to talk about on that subject and what we think and, and everything on that regard. So I just think it's just going to be so long that it's going to be a little bit, it's going to be tough times for I wouldn't say tough, but it's just not going to be the easiest thing until the deal gets done. When it gets done, if it gets done, there'll be a big sigh of relief.
Yeah. No, that's a great point.
So Tim, sorry. So when you say that, you like when you say a fight, you think like you mean like as far as the deal going through?
I just feel that the climate for Xbox kind of they don't have the best. Honestly, if it was different times, different administration, it would be different. I think that though they kind of got a time where the government wants to strut their stuff and they want to attack certain things, and I think that I think that there's gonna be a lot of scrutiny on the deal, whether they have a case or not. That for me is something that I could give you my opinion, but I would definitely you know uh, refer to like Hogue and stuff like that on that stuff with a much more educated and understanding opinion on this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But
Hmm.
I just feel like the optics and everything.
Mm-hmm.
You have a hotshot new person, Lena Khan, that's taking over, or just restructuring, and they've had they've already said that they want to go at big corporations, and they want to keep the competitive the landscape and the field competitive. They don't want big corporations just gobbling everything up. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of scrutiny, and there might be some things that have to happen for the deal to get through, but I don't know if they have the case to really shoot it down. And that's really the crux of it. That's why I think that they're going to get a pass. But yeah, this isn't going to be easy. Put it that way. In my opinion, I don't think it's going to be easy. And maybe from the question, not to be too long-winded, that's what's maybe changed. I thought definitely would go through like last week, but now I definitely think that there's going to be things that
Mm-hmm.
it's not gonna it's going to be a tough, just an arduous way of it. It's not going to be easiest path.
Yeah. Yeah. Real quick, Tim, I do want to introduce Slummo Backslaps. What's up, Slummo?
Yo, what is going on, fellas? How you guys doing tonight?
We are doing well,
Good,
sir.
good. What's up,
Yeah.
brother?
Good.
All right. I do want to go. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Slummo.
No, I'm good.
Oh.
I'm good.
I do want to go to Hogue. Hogue, what are your has your opinion on the acquisition changed? Again, same thing. The last week, as you kind of digested more of everything that's happened.
Well, I mean, I think my first reaction was how abjectly stunning it was.
Mm-hmm.
So that wears off a little bit.
Yes,
As you
yep.
kind of get into the weeds. I've also done, I don't even know, 8 or 9 videos on it from a number of different angles over on my channel at this point. So I've dived into the merger agreement itself, which I don't recommend. It's 100 pages long of legalese. But I've looked at that. I've looked at all angles of this. And I think overall, I think it's a strong acquisition. I think if you look at the context in which it was made by Microsoft, it's a publisher that has a cachet of assets, some of more historical value than present day, but that could be revived with proper nurturing and resource management. And it was a company that, I think if we're all honest with ourselves, shot itself in the foot and then shot itself in the other foot and then found other places on its body to shoot last year.
Yeah.
When it was dealing with even just the public relations responses to what had happened, right?
Oh, yeah.
Even in just kind of managing expectations, companies can get sued for this kind of stuff and handle it better. Microsoft has been sued for the kind of stuff that Activision has been sued for and handled it better. So Activision was busy killing itself. And then in November, the Wall Street Journal article comes out, calls Bobby Kotick to task. The stock price takes another tumble. And at that point, if you're Microsoft, and there are competing journalistic outlets that suggest that Microsoft called Activision, Activision called Microsoft. I'm not going to get into the fray there because I don't have any better information than anybody else. But however it happened, by the time you get to a $60 stock price, a $58 stock price, the Microsofts of the world can go in there and say, well, we're going to buy at a premium, which you have to do in order to buy a public company. We're going to buy at a premium, but that premium is only going to take us up to a price that the assets were valued at before all this happened. So if you're Microsoft, $70 billion, yeah, that's a lot of money. We're not talking about nothing. But Activision, before this kind of stuff had happened, which is a cultural issue and not really an asset management issue, before that happened, the company would have been valued at 100, 105, 110 billion. And so Microsoft looks at that and says, well, let's jump in, let's take that. We're always looking for content for Game Pass, certainly over the last 3 years. And so I think it makes a lot of sense for their perspective. I heard Tim talking about potential regulatory concerns, and I think we can get deeper into that. I will take your lead as to how deep you want to go and just follow your questions on that. But he is absolutely right in his notion that antitrust regulation in the United States, and really in every jurisdiction, is a function of the political zeitgeist. That we see these kinds of waves of whether we want to enforce them more harshly or less harshly. And certainly in this moment, in fact, the same day Microsoft announces its transaction, the FTC and the DOJ, the two agencies in the United States that are responsible for looking at these things, indicated strongly that they want to enforce the antitrust laws more harshly, and specifically more harshly in respect to tech and digital marketplaces that control data and cloud infrastructure and that kind of thing. Does that mean the deal's not going to go through? No, it doesn't. In fact, if I were betting money, if I had to bet my house on this, I would say it will go through. Could it be tweaked a little bit? Yes. And we could talk more specifics there. But overall, I've had a lot of time to think about it. I've thought about it in a lot of different ways. I think it's a good deal for Microsoft. I think Activision Blizzard needed a cleansing action of some kind. Something was going to happen. And I think this makes a lot of sense. I do get concerned, like others have, about potential over-consolidation. I love competition. I think competition in the marketplace is great.
Which, real quick, Hogue, I definitely want to talk about that too,
Sure,
the consolidation, because I think I haven't seen that conversation come up a lot. But I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Hey, you got to step on me, because this is what I do when I'm doing my channel. I can just talk for 40 minutes.
I love it. I'm loving it.
Yeah. So I do think there's a risk of over-consolidation. We can absolutely kind of pick at that, talk about it a little bit more. But overall, I love that Microsoft, after 20 years, has said, you know what? Let's throw $100 billion at this industry and see what happens. And as long as PlayStation can survive, and they can, we could talk about that.
We'll talk
as long
about
as
that
Nintendo
too.
can survive, then video gamers in general are improved, their lives, their content, everything else, by a company that, to be frank, has to go justify that money that it just spent by delivering content and services to you.
Yeah. That's a great point, Hogue. Real quick, I do want to go to E, because Eric, you weren't here last week. You were out celebrating, rightfully so. E, what are your thoughts now? Again, we're a week into this now. Do you feel any different about this acquisition now?
No. Like Hogue just said, we'll get more into it. Like, I think, overall, like, I don't have a problem with like the deal itself or anything like that. I do, being that, I'm on the older side of the gaming world and tech and seeing these different things in general, it's like there should be a level of excitement because the one thing going into this generation, I think I've said it actually on here, was it feels like there's a level of unpredictability that's about to happen, and that's exciting. And this is, like Hogue said, you want competition pushing back and forth, and we're definitely seeing a different side of a Microsoft. And they can't really apologize for the fact that they have the ends to do what they're doing. They're a rich company, so they have it to swing and throw around. I think on the better side of it, and we'll get into this too, as far as, them if this goes through and they're adopting an Activision, they have some things that they need to clean up. As being a mega corporation, no mega corporation is perfect in how they handle and deal with certain things. But I think overall, the employees of Activision will be in a better position under a Microsoft than they were under an Activision, because Activision, to me, looked like they were on a downward spiral in all ways.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I think overall, the more things will unravel. We'll get more details on it. But no, I'm not one of these people who's sitting here like this is a monopoly or anything like that. Because, Hogue probably agree. You look at like how Disney was just gobbling everything up under a different administration, and I was just sitting back like, man, how is it possible they're allowed to just do this? It's about like The Simpsons is under Disney. That's never in my life would have thought I would have seen that, right?
That's right.
Crazy stuff.
Alien, a Disney movie.
Yeah, I'm just like
Alien at Disney.
Like, I'm like, Disney's out here Thanos in this thing, just grabbing everybody, right? So,
facts.
So I don't think when people throw out the term monopoly as far as what Microsoft, where they are in the position compared to others like a Tencent, a NetEase, or Embracer, I don't think they're quite on that yet. But as I was saying before, on being on the older side of the gaming world, there is a bit of caution that I exercise when any mega corporation is removing a publisher and a huge dev off the board.
Yeah.
And removing myself, which I don't really typically like. I mean, laughs and jokes, fine. People do what they do, like on Twitter, but I do see this level of the tribalism kind of going into it. And it's like, is Is it more worth dunking on somebody, for a Twitter beef, or are you really thinking critical about what all this stuff really means? What feels good today doesn't necessarily mean it's good for the future. I mean, it could be good or bad. We don't know. We don't know enough to know where all this stuff is going. But exercise a little bit of caution along with your excitement. And it's not really worth dunking on somebody you don't really know who has no bearing on your life just to be like, yep, this is great. All of it is great. All of it is good. It's perfect, and I hope Nintendo and Sony die out of it, or I hope Microsoft gets investigated and the deal doesn't go. It's like all these weird things like don't mean anything in the grand scheme of things,
Yeah.
So I would just say that's kind of where my head is. It's like there's an excitement around it as being a gamer, watching how these things are unfolding and what that may mean for the types of, experiences we're going to get from the gaming side of it. But then at the same time, just kind of watching it and going, there's some, all this consolidation is weird, because, and the reason I say that is because while today it feels great because we have someone like who, I don't know him, he seems really nice, but we have a Phil in place and Satya seems to be on board with mega corporations. You never know if you're going to get, and I shout out to Cognito, he said this on Defining Dude, he said, you get a Don Matrick Jr. a few years from now, what could happen with that?
The suits, yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, E. Real quick, I want to say hello to Forte. Forte, what's up, man?
Oh man, what up, though? You guys, yo, what's up, man? It's Wednesday night, man.
Yeah, great to see you, man.
It's just been a crazy day, man. I went to go fire up my snowblower 2 days ago in Michigan and was like, oh, this isn't working. So it gave me a reason. So it gave me a reason to go buy another one.
Oh man, I hear you. Well, real quick, Forte, I do
bigger
want to go
and better.
I want to go to Slomo real quick. Again, Slomo, same question to you, man. Like, any have you had a difference of opinion now that you're week into this now, kind of again digested this acquisition more?
No, not really. A lot of the information that's been slowly kind of trickling out isn't really moving the needle for me as far as, and I'm pretty sure it's not really moving the needle for most people who have like an idea of like, well, I think all games are going to stay multi-plat, or I think that once the contractual obligations are up, that they'll largely go exclusive. The news that came out today about there being the exact amount of games that seem to be under contract, and then the knowledge of a Warzone 2, which I guess made sense once I heard it, but initially I just kind of figured just Warzone would just continue on indefinitely, like a lot of these other free-to-play games like Fortnite, Apex Legends, stuff like that, right? But doing a Warzone 2 kind of made sense, and that it would be kind of decoupled away from last gen, and then you can kind of be a little bit more, I guess, a little bit more engaged in increasing the visual fidelity and performance of things. Now that you know that your lowest common denominator likely would be like an Xbox Series S, and maybe wherever you want to cut it off at for low and the mid-gen PCs. But I mean, largely for the most part, I still feel the same. I've never thought about this somehow becoming a monopoly. Like, I don't know how you could be a monopoly when this acquisition puts you number 3 in revenue. Like, how like, it doesn't? I don't see how that makes sense to me. I think that's there's a lot of people that shout like things like that, and President Biden does a tweet, and you got people telling in the tweet, "Hey, can you investigate Activision Blizzard?"
That,
I'm like, did you even
Like,
read the bill? Of course, you didn't read the bill.
No.
He's not talking about this kind of stuff at all. Like, it's the executive order is about many other industries that have actual antitrust issues going on, like big issues going on, not video games, you brainlet. Like, I hate to call people brainless, but they're brainless, right? So it's weird how people tie everything into the console war. I think, but I do think when it comes to Activision itself, I'm hoping that the culture of sexual harassment and all that other stuff that has been going on there for years, decades. Because I mean, a lot of that stuff predates Blizzard being acquired by Activision as well. So like, this is ingrained in the culture of both of these two great companies, and hopefully that gets completely exercised out of these companies. We haven't seen or heard of really much of that kind of talk from the Xbox camp of studios. I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all. I'm just saying that we haven't heard of anything like that happening. So I'm hoping that is more not along the lines of they're better at suppressing things, and more along the lines of it ain't happening over there. And so hopefully some of that oversight from leadership can trickle down to removing the people who have been hiding, protecting those, or doing that kind of stuff at Activision Blizzard. Get them on out of here. Get people in who understand how to treat people equally, fairly, and also make good games out here. Right now, the whole Raven Software situation. Kind of like I don't think they actually even have any kind of ability to do anything about that. And what I mean by that is the fact that like they have decided to unionize the QA department. And it looks like Raven Software's move is to just pretend like it's not happening. Just like I don't see or hear anything, right? I don't know. Like I don't know what's going on there, but maybe Ho could illuminate me.
Yeah, I mean, we could jump into it later. I don't want to. You're talking, but the only thing I would say is that a lot of the reporting on the unionization jumped the gun a little bit on that process. So we can talk about it with more specifics. It's a little bit more complicated than that.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, yeah, if you want to expound upon it, that'd be great, because I would love to know more about what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, so basically what happens, right? We saw in December that they're collecting signature cards, and these signature cards say, we want to join a union. And they're passed around, I believe, all of Activision. I believe that what A Better ABK was saying they were doing, and I'm not there, so it's all basically other people telling folks what's happening on the outside, is that they sent those signature cards out to everybody, and then they collect them. And if you get to 30%, of what's called a bargaining unit, then that bargaining unit can go and ask for an election. And then if there's an election, if 50% plus one person vote to unionize, bam, you've got a union. And then whoever's negotiating against that collective bargaining unit has to, by law, negotiate in good faith with that bargaining unit. But bargaining units can be all sorts of different things. They can be the whole company. Activision's 9,500 people. They can be any given subsidiary. They can be a specific location. They can be a specific job type. And so what happened a week ago was that CWA, which is the formal big giant union who's helping the A Better ABK folks put this all together, said, look, we've got 78% of the signature cards indicating they want to form a union from the QA testers at Raven Software. So a specific group of people doing a specific job at a specific subsidiary of Activision. And they said, we would like to be recognized as a union of Raven Software QA testers. What happens then is that, in general, 9 times out of 10, they then have to go ask the National Labor Relations Board to hold an election for them, that they want to be in a union. And the National Labor Relations Board has a number of things to do there. And one of those is to confirm that it's a good unit. You have to have a community of interest is the magic words for that. And more importantly, as I've discussed in Virtual Legality, you have to not have a community of interest with other people that are not going to be in your union. Because one of the things that the National Labor Relations Act wants to avoid is micro unions, where you would have 24 overlapping unions and an employer would just die because they can't negotiate all those contracts. Because these things take time and effort and money from and lawyers, right? No matter what, any story I say, you know who gets paid? It's the lawyers. And that happens with union contract negotiations as well. But when they get those 78% signature cards, that's essentially like the polling before a political election. That's saying this is an expression of interest. When you then go to the vote, the number never matches up. Sometimes it's higher, oftentimes it's lower, because some people sign those signature cards because they want to have an election and see what their fellow employees want to do. Either way, there is no unionization from a legal perspective until there's actually a certified election, or the employer can short circuit that process and just say, forget it, you don't need to do an election. We will, what you've seen reported on, voluntarily recognize your union. But that particular kind of pathway for an employer is kind of fraught because you don't know how the signature cards were collected. You don't know whether it's a valid collective bargaining unit. And so 9 times out of 10, the employers say, okay, great. go ask the National Labor Relations Board for an election and we'll hold an election. Or if you're a little bit more cynically minded, force them to go ask and then make their lives difficult for that entire period of time. And so when that happens, that's the normal course. So it's a little bit weird to be reporting on this as, one, they unionized back a week ago, because they didn't. They named themselves a union and then they asked for recognition and then Activision didn't give it. And then two, it's a little bit weird to kind of pillory Activision, which is deserving of pillorying in a number of different contexts on this particular score, where they say, hey, we're not going to just voluntarily recognize, especially since they're also in the shadow of a transaction they just signed up. The company, while it's still being operated by them, is not fully theirs while we're in this kind of transition limbo period.
Right.
And so
right.
they shouldn't be taking active steps to change the status quo in any regard. Good, bad, otherwise.
When I first heard that they were doing this, I thought to myself, oh, they're taking advantage of the situation. Kind of like almost like a public relations disaster if they try to like union bust like most companies tend to do. They try to union bust a union that's trying to form. But like in light of the current situation, you got like, you know, your public image out here is already in the dumpster. You just got acquired by Microsoft. Everything is very much in flux at the moment. Yeah, let's go unionize now, because then maybe we can actually we've caught them off guard in an opportunity where the public eye is on them so much that they can't act in or do what they want to do. But instead, maybe that actually might allow us to get unionized. Like, that's why I thought it was kind of like a interesting strategic move to go for in light of everything that was going on. But what you're saying seems really interesting to me, especially the part where you talked about having too many unions can make it difficult for an employer to kind of manage the negotiations. It kind of brought me back to my wife works at like the biggest hospital in the Washington, D.C. area, Washington Hospital Center. And so they literally have a union for every department. She works in a particular department, but the nurses have a union, the doctors have a union, the anesthesiologists have a union. Everyone's got a union. And she's talked about how some unions, and there are different like union organizations that manage all of them. It's not just like one union that does it all, but some of them are more successful in negotiations than others. And she's always complaining about how her union just sucks. Like, they're terrible.
Well, there are institutions. I tell this to people about unions, right? Every institution, there's good versions, there's bad versions, there's good versions of managers, bad versions of managers. So yeah, it's being evaluated by the employees on the ground. And maybe a union makes sense for them. Maybe it doesn't. I really do dislike kind of the third party overlords telling these employees of any industry exactly what they should do. It's up to them. That's why the laws are written that way. And if they want to unionize and it brings them a better job, that's fantastic. And if they decide not to, hey, that's the employees making that decision.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. Go ahead, Enrique.
No, I was going to say, I want to grab these super chats real quick before I forget them. We got Sir Xman at the $2 super chat. Says, BRAP talks too much crap in Halo. I love it. I do talk a little shit on Halo. I definitely do that.
In Halo, while you playing it, or about Halo? Which one you talk? Which one?
Depends on the day.
Okay.
Lucius Augustus with the $2 super chat says, shout out to Hogue. He's on every podcast recently. That's yeah. Hogue's been Hogue's on a tour right now. So
I love talking about this stuff. So I try to accept every invitation that I can if I've got the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But no, Forte, go to you real quick before we pivot here. Have your thoughts on this acquisition changed at all, or you kind of feel the same way as you did last week?
I mean, I kind of feel the same way. Mostly, I mean, the only thing that I think I found out more of, like Slobo said, about the whole Warzone thing, and that kind of brings to light that more than likely that gives us an idea when Call of Duty itself was going to pivot over to being next gen only instead of it being on previous gen. Because if they're going to change Warzone over and take away last gen, then it's kind of thinking they're going to do the same thing with the mainline Call of Duties too. So that kind of opens up the funnel to see like how available are these next gen systems really going to be around that time, because that's when the majority of people, when Call of Duty moves, a lot of people are going to move with it. So it's going to probably be a real interesting time around that, especially with everything with this acquisition going on at the same time. But I never really thought anything of it, mostly due to the fact that we really don't know anything. It's like I kind of have my ideas on what I think is going to happen. And, that's just all personal belief in what I think should happen. And I think that's kind of the direction a lot of people are really leaning in, but they're kind of treating it as almost a fact. But for me, it's like, I know what they should do because that's what I would do. But ultimately, it really just comes down to what makes sense for them. I mean, when it comes to just the dynamics of, having two large publishers Xbox and PlayStation's publishers too. But when it comes down to that, it's like, no one really wants to hurt anybody's feelings in this conversation. And that kind of to be why they're like dancing around the scenarios and everything like that. But in general, it just comes back to the conversation has always been, we want our games to be where a particular entity lives, which is the platform of Game Pass and everything. So until we actually hear more and more, and we won't, and this will be something we'll talk about for like the next 13 months, honestly. It will be, and they'll do the same thing when they do their Activision, Microsoft, or Activision and Xbox round table, and they'll sit down and say, well, we've been telling people this kind of, secretly for a long time what we were going to do. We just really couldn't come out and say it. So I think until we actually have that conversation when they're sitting at a table talking about this, that's when we're going to get the answers that most people truly want to know the true answer to. But in general, it just really just comes down to, I mean, sit back, enjoy the ride. If you have a PlayStation, you don't have to pitch it. You still be able to play all of those same great exclusives. You got Horizon coming out in a couple of weeks. And then Elden Ring and everything is going to be on all these different systems too. Call of Duty will still be foreseeably on all of these platforms, probably till 2024 at the absolute earliest of the pool. So I don't really think that harping and really having these deep conversations, I can understand them right now because it's something that's super new. But I'm just kind of regretting like 6 months from now where we're still having the same conversation about something that no one really truly knows anything about it. And the thing is, Hogue, I watch all Hogue stuff, and Hogue will tell you the same thing. He was like, no one really knows how this is really going to go. We can speculate on it. Mm-hmm. We can have ideas on how this is going to turn out. But ultimately, it just comes down to, we're hungry for knowledge. That's kind of the downside, and the positive side of the human race. We always want to know more and consume as much information as possible. And this is one of those situations that we have no insight into unless you're inside one of those boardrooms of Activision or Microsoft. So I just take the conversation as I'll find out when I find out, and I'm just going to have my opinion of what I think should happen. If that opinion is completely different from what Microsoft says it is, I'm going to be fine with it because guess what? I own everything and games. And if you're a gamer, I mean, I understand if you have opportunities where you can't own everything, but for the most part, if you have the chance or the opportunity to do it, you shouldn't be loyal to anything. Just buy whatever is good for you and what you need to play the games you want to play, and you won't even have an issue even if something like this pops up. Because trust me, Microsoft ain't done. I think they're going to do more in the future. I just don't think it's going to happen until this situation kind of finishes itself out, and then you'll start seeing more stuff happening probably over the course of the next 3 to 4 years. Yeah, that's a great point, Forte. Real quick before we pivot to kind of what Tim had talked about earlier in the show, I do Shout
think.
Out to Tim.
I do want to say that I've seen a lot of people, and I see Slow-Mo having this conversation in the chat right now.
It's illuminating, isn't it? I feel like I'm learning so much now. I'm not. That's all sarcasm. Go ahead.
I've seen a lot of people say Microsoft is going to come in there and change the culture. I do think that there's there's tremendous opportunity for them to do that. Like that's not. I don't think that's. I'm not disputing that, but I think it's going to be probably very difficult to do. It's going to take some time. It's nothing that's going to happen overnight. I mean, They're gonna have to.
They can't legally do anything.
Well, they can't. Yeah, and that's the thing. They can't do anything
so
right now.
everything that's happening now
still
is
there,
still going to happen until. I mean, of course, you would think that they know that the acquisition is right around the corner. You know, a lot of people think or know that this is going to probably go through for the most part, but it's still a situation. 13 months from now, at the earliest, or 14 or 18 months, that's when Microsoft can start the process.
Yeah.
So people thinking that they're mentally saying it's going to change. It's like, oh, it's going to change. It's going to change. You're putting a lot of faith in something that you truly don't know until
we
Microsoft
don't know,
can't even do anything legally until this is done.
Yeah, right. That's a great point, Forte. So I want to go back to what Tim was saying, because Tim expressed some concern about this deal. He didn't say it was not going to happen. He just thinks there's going to be more. It's going to be a little more challenging given the political climate. You know, Hogue, you read you mentioned the 100-page acquisition document. I think you said earlier in the show. What do you think, Hogue? Just your legal expertise here. What do you think could potentially kind of hold this deal up?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, I think if people don't know, in terms of understanding the timeline here, it's important to understand that when they announce a deal like that, they've signed a merger agreement like the one that I looked at, and that's a promise to buy the company in the future if certain conditions are met. We saw this when Microsoft bought ZeniMax and Bethesda, right? We saw it announced, I believe it was September, sometime in the fall, and it was closed. The deal was actually finished, the money changed hands, and the company became a Microsoft entity in the spring of the next year. So when you sign these documents, you've basically said, hey, we're going to do this. We've both agreed to do it, but we still have some conditions to meet. A lot of the times that's logistical. It's moving contracts around. It's figuring out how structure is going to work. It's dealing with a bunch of stuff that the lawyers get paid to deal with, but not that he's going to blow up the transaction. Here, Microsoft actually said in its statements that they weren't anticipating closing until at least fiscal year 23, which means that the closing here would be between, in Microsoft's estimation, 6 and 18 months, give or take, from when they announced it, going all the way until the middle of the year next year, which is the close of their fiscal year 2023. So the reason that you give that in this particular context is because you are reserving for potential regulatory issues. One of the conditions will be that in the United States and various other jurisdictions, the two parties will submit the information about the transaction to federal agencies, in our case, the FTC and the DOJ, and then those agencies will review the information and decide whether they think the transaction creates a monopoly or substantially lessens competition, or more specifically, may substantially lessen competition in the eyes of those agencies. They have about 30 days from when that information is submitted to evaluate it, but if they don't just want to allow the deal to go through at that 30-day expiration window, they can instead say, hey, we think this one could cause a problem. We need to know more in order to determine if it will, and then they can start asking for information, documentation, and a whole bunch of other stuff from those parties. That's called a second look or a second view. And I think at the $70 billion level, regardless of whether you think Microsoft is going to be a monopoly or substantially less in competition, the FTC and the DOJ are unlikely to not take that step to go deeper and to look at more information about these parties to evaluate it. So once you're in second view territory, then well, the timeline extends because they'll ask for some information. Then Microsoft and Activision might give it to them. They might have a problem with that. They might ask for additional information until that entire kind of back and forth finishes up and the FTC is satisfied with the information that it has received. That second window doesn't open. So they don't have to actually allow everything to go through until they're happy with the information that they've gotten from those bodies. And that can take an indeterminate amount of additional time. That's why you get that window from Microsoft saying, by the end of next year, our fiscal next year, so June 30. And that's really the biggest potential stumbling block. And I say that as an American lawyer about the U.S. regulatory agencies. As a multinational company, the European Union, Great Britain, those jurisdictions would have something to say about this as well. And so that's what the regulators are dealing with. Yeah.
Oh, real quick, is there going to be more scrutiny on the EU side? Because I've seen some people throw that out there, suggest that might be the case.
Historically, the European Union has been more aggressive about blocking, altering, otherwise mitigating transactions that have an antitrust potential than the United States has been. Like I said at the top of this video, there has been some saber rattling from the FTC or DOJ about potentially enforcing antitrust laws more harshly than they have been in the past. So going into the future, they might be at the same level, or heck, even the United States might be more aggressive in pursuing antitrust actions. But historically, certainly the recent history has been that the European Union and certain other jurisdictions are more aggressive. And so they'll be watching this. The U.S. will probably go first on these kinds of things, but all these jurisdictions will be looking at it. If you recall, when the ZeniMax deal happened, you did get sign-off from the European Union. One important thing to note about the United States process is that our regulatory bodies don't sign off. They don't give a green light. They don't approve the deal. Effectively, their investigation just stops, and the deal is allowed without their blocking or changing it, which does mean, unfortunately, that they can change their mind many years hence and decide to sue over the deal, as we're seeing right now with Facebook and WhatsApp, which was a deal that was allowed. And then now the FTC looks at it and says, no, we probably shouldn't have allowed that one. So unwind that. And that creates all sorts of problems when you have kind of ingrained the two companies, you put resources into it, and that's what Facebook is arguing right now.
Yeah, that's a great point that the U.S. government. Yeah, the U.S. government can always go back and look at this, revisit this down the road, which. Yeah.
So what's the worst case scenario in those like moments where they say, "Oh, we shouldn't have allowed this. This is awful." And I mean, so what happens? Does the company that was acquired now become independent after all the years and time where the other company was investing in them and stuff? And I mean, like, how does that work?
It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't work easily, right? This is something of a rare circumstance for the FTC and Facebook. And Facebook is honestly arguing most strongly about, hey, we spent this money, we spent this time, we spent these resources doing various things with this. It's almost impossible to unwind and make us whole. And so they're saying we shouldn't have to. And that'll go in various different places, and we'll see what happens with it. It's very early stages there. So we don't know whether the FTC will win that. I think one other important aspect of this entire process is that the FTC, the DOJ, the executive agencies are responsible for policing this stuff. They aren't the final arbiters of whether or not there actually is a problem, right? So the FTC, let's just imagine them rolling up and saying, actually, Microsoft, we think you might have a monopoly here in gaming as a service, recurring revenue products, and that this will allow you to monopolize the market in an untoward way, primarily with Game Pass. They say that, and they're going to block the deal or they're going to do something else. That's essentially a legal action, a lawsuit. There's some administrative law that happens during it as well. But ultimately, it would be determined by a judge, a member of the judiciary branch, as to whether or not they were right or not. If you think about the Microsoft antitrust lawsuits in the 90s and the early 2000s, that was fought tooth and nail between the executive branch and Microsoft, ultimately being determined by a court. And so there's a lot of minds at play here that would be determining whether or not something was wrong. But that's the process. That's why Microsoft reserves that time. And the people that are out there on the internet saying, hey, something could happen here, are right. I still think that the deal is likely to go through. I think gaming, as was referenced in a couple of places in this conversation, is low on the totem pole for the FTC and the Biden administration. But it's not impossible for a politically minded member of any of these agencies to say, hey, Microsoft's the top line party of this thing. We can go after them. And as much as you might think it's not applicable, and I tend to agree, we do have an executive order that points at things like new technologies, data management, cloud infrastructure, critical software and hardware pieces that you could attach, even if not directly to gaming in certain respects, to Microsoft as an entire entity and say, look, they're gaining too much power in a way that we find untowards, and let's block it. Let's tweak it. Let's have some concessions from them. Let's have a divestiture. Maybe they have to not buy everything as part of the deal. And I don't think that that's likely to happen necessarily, or at least not more likely than not. but it's not impossible. And those voices that are out there saying, hey, there's zero chance that this happens, Microsoft has the best lawyers in the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they're wrong. There's a non-zero chance that something occurs at the regulatory level. And even Microsoft's lawyers would tell you that. Lawyers don't make guarantees. What they do is they evaluate risk profiles, and they would give you the same report that I just did that says the FTC and the DOJ, hey, they look like they're eager to punish somebody and halt some transactions. And so in that environment, you have to say, well, there's at least a percentage chance that something happens, at which point Microsoft and their business people say, look, we're going to be the third in gaming revenue. We think we can punch this through. And you say, okay. Clients do things that the lawyers say maybe you shouldn't do all the time. But here I think the lawyers would basically be advising them that there's a possibility that something happens, but not necessarily a likelihood. And they'd be arguing the same kind of thing, ironically enough, that you see on the internet. Hey, the Fox Disney deal went through, no problem, that kind of thing at a relatively similar price point. But I do think this is going to get a second look. I do think there's reason to be at least mildly concerned that something could happen on the way to the church here. But all other things being equal, it's more likely than not that it goes through in relatively the same fashion as it was announced.
Yeah. Very insightful, by the way, Hogue. All of this is fascinating. I can't wait to see this, play out. That was a great point that you brought up earlier about this. Maybe there could be some trouble. I don't think it's all going to be sunshine and roses, but I do agree. I do think this deal is going to eventually go through. I do think it's going to get some eyes on it, obviously, for some of the things you mentioned earlier, too. Some of the political grandstanding that's going on right now. I mean, Jerry Nadler actually tweeted out the day of the deal, right?
See, I didn't use a word like grandstanding, but yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of what it is. I mean, so.
Well, I said that. I think I inferred that.
You did, Tim. Yeah.
Scary thing is that I do. Listen, I don't want it to be that type of thing where Washington gets involved and becomes one of those things where they want to take they want to take somebody down and that's like the overall feeling. I just hope it's done fair and that's just my whole thing is that I definitely think that big corporations, like I said, should have scrutiny, especially on deals like this, a horizontal, merger. And listen, we do know that I'm a huge Xbox fan and stuff like that. But I've talked to many people about this. I've had, Jay Singh on Twitter. He sends me like all these articles, and he's really into it. And he's like, he's giving me, all sides of it. I've read a ton of articles. I've watched a ton of the CNBC stuff, the MSNBC stuff, and I think that where Hogue was saying that's the overall sentiment. I think the Wed Bush analyst gave it an 80% chance of getting done. So yeah, I just like I said, I fear and I kind of get a feeling that. They're going to want to draw some blood, or they're going to want to get something where they can say, "Hey, look, we're not being pushovers anymore," and they had to make a concession here, and you better watch out, Facebook and big companies that were, it's not going to be an easy road anymore, and I think just it's a matter of time and being at possibly the wrong place, but it's going to be a fight, and there might be some tense moments. I can tell you that, even Phil's tweet about COD exclusivity and all that stuff was very telling to me, and I do feel like all the people at Microsoft are probably on and Blizzard and Activision, and they're on their feet with this. Like, I talked to Mike, but there's nothing Ybarra, and there's nothing there other than, hey, what are the Rams doing? But I think that when the deal gets done, like I said, or if it gets done, there'll be a fresh air and you can get some insight, and then all this stuff will come up. But one of the things that I thought that was very insightful, that's something that the whole talked about, was I didn't know that they can go back. So like people were saying, oh, once the deal gets through, ha ha ha, we're just gonna do this, and we might have made some promises there, and now we're just gonna make everything exclusive or something like that. I didn't know that they could actually go back and litigate it. That's kind of it's kind of scary in a way that it's a done deal is not necessarily a full done deal. If you have some wrongdoing, and I guess in a way that it should be that way. It's very interesting. I'm going to look into the Facebook WhatsApp. I think that's interesting, and I think something I'll keep my eye on.
Yeah,
I do kind of find it interesting. Just to touch on what Tim Dog has said, like that is very illuminating about how they could go back and say, "Hey, this didn't turn out the way we thought it would." And you said some things that gave us the indication that it would be one way, but it's another way. I do think that if with there being a Warzone 2, and that Warzone 2 is definitely going to be on PlayStation, I think even if they decide to make the annual Call of Duties, which may not be annual anymore, we'll see what happens. I do kind of feel like they're probably, after the 2013 Call of Duty, decide to get off the annual treadmill, which might be best for the game itself, so that the games are a little bit better, or run a little bit better, maybe have better campaigns, that kind of stuff. But if they decide to make those exclusive, but Warzone, which is the more popular Call of Duty game, like that game averages 250,000 people playing it on a daily basis, versus the annual releases of Call of Duty not being as popular as they once were since Warzone has come out. I think keeping Warzone on all platforms, but making the Call of Duty annual releases, or maybe now semi-annual releases, exclusive, with the draw being that the players that play Warzone like to get those annual games so that they could level up guns to use in Warzone. That, hey, if you want to do those things, go do that on Game Pass. Like, that can be the draw to kind of get people towards Game Pass. And also additionally having rewards for just being Game Pass Ultimate members towards Warzone 2 would also kind of help there as well. But if it ever gets back to the point where legislators are like, wait a minute now, we seeing exclusive Call of Duty games, you said you weren't going to do that they could always point to Warzone and say the most popular Call of Duty game is still on PlayStation. Like, not saying they're trying to like trick people, but like essentially we were never lying in the first place, because Call of Duty is still on PlayStation.
Call of Duty, yeah.
My personal opinion, and I've gotten pushback from people in the community, and just even people not even that are not necessarily fanboys to say per se, they're just in a business sense. To me, listen, if I'm going to be honest with the situation, I do think that this will make Xbox better and put them in a better position. But I'm firmly of the belief that Sony is still going to lead in gaming, and it's going to be a tough fight to dethrone them for a long time. So I don't really think that this is going to be something where it just like obliterates Sony. And on the flip side, with the people where I get pushback, I don't think necessarily. I can understand why people think that Call of Duty should be multi-plat. I can understand that for the fact that you've kind of built this community where people wait every year to get the new iteration, and that those communities are active on that game for the whole 365 until the next,
the next one comes out. Yeah.
And I think there's so many people that just play COD. Okay, it's not like you're talking about like a guy that was a kid, 2013, 18 years old. Now he's like married and he just plays Call of Duty on PlayStation. I don't think necessarily that it's the right thing to take that away from him or force him onto another platform. And that's where I get my kickback, is that I think that you're still going to do great with the game on Game Pass and the other perks that you can have, the exclusivity perks. as like DLC if you want to do that, or early access. But I'm of the thing of if that's going to speed up the process and kind of show that you're working in good faith, that make it multiplat. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's. I think you'd still get, you'd still get benefits as it is. And like I said, I just feel that Sony, there's no, like, people who think that this is going to destroy Sony. You're on for a rude awakening. Sony is this. That's what their company's about, gaming right now for the most part. They're focused on that, and they have, they've proven themselves year after year after year, generation after generation. So I'm just of the opinion that all three can just be wildly, successful and maybe a little successful in different ways, but
Yep.
all three just at 25 billion revenue every year, and it's just a big money maker, because just gaming in general is continually growing, and it's just huge.
Yeah,
I agree. Look, we've been saying that here for years, that all three of these, like within the console market, Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft can be successful in their own ways, and not like everyone's being profitable. Everyone there's a huge pie because gaming continues to grow every year. There are new gamers that come into the gaming industry more so than those who leave it, and when you're a overall bigger market than the movie industry and the music industry, like it just continues to grow. Gaming isn't in the space where there wasn't enough gamers out there to support Sega, Sony, and Nintendo. Like where Sega had to get out because they couldn't survive with Sony being in the market. Like it's not like that anymore.
And it's growing, and it's still growing. I'm sorry, Tim. Go ahead.
No, I just think it's a very good point. I'm sorry to interrupt for that, but I have to agree with you that, when that happened, when Sega had to leave, you only had a section of gamers, and you only had that, that market. But now it's just vastly growing, and it's just growing like crazy. That I think Slow-Mo was saying the pie is getting bigger, and it's huge. So,
yeah.
It's a good thing in a way, and I love to see that video games is probably it is the number one entertainment medium right now.
Yeah, and kind of what I wanted to say was like, it's growing exponentially, and what happens is when change happens and when shakeup happens, it kind of forces all parties involved to not really rest on their laurels and to start thinking like outside the box. Like it's not the status quo. Like some things have changed, some things have moved around. And if I could borrow something Slow-Mo said, which is a great point, he said, it's like in our DM once, is what you're probably going to start seeing is the market expanding into other up and comers, having opportunities to kind of like move up and show what they can do. And that's where these companies will start looking at some of like these other developers who are coming up. Not we're talking about the biggest and like an Activision or whatever, but there's a lot of talent that is still out there that can be cultivated, given opportunity, drive, and who may develop and push the next big thing, that you'll find like that next big multiplayer game and that next big thing. And, and this is where I wanted to put out too, and I wanted to throw this back at Tim and see what he thinks about it. But this is where I said the people lack the critical thinking when they get too invested in the Twitter beef and the back and forth, right? Because when you think about in terms of a Call of Duty or whatever, I know people say like, well, Sony went and bought studios, whatever. You're talking about how many generations or years ago that they bought these studios that they worked with and cultivated. Like I know they recently bought Insomniac, but they had that long-standing relationship with them, right? Yeah. And in Guerrilla and companies like that, none of those companies had a multi-platform game like a Call of Duty. So you can understand why people are like, wait, hold up. So nothing was like moved off the table where it made people notice. So yeah, when you move something as big, which is Call of Duty, while it's had its rough spots in the last couple of years, it's still dominant. So it's going to put a target on their back. So that is interesting in what Tim said. The fight is going to be there because you're moving a piece that you can't just quietly do it like you did like a Ninja Theory, right, or something like that. You have a bigger target on you moving this big piece. Even Bethesda, as big as it is to us, it's not quite the same as moving an Activision. So
Right,
people need to kind of
yeah.
stand back and chill on the whole. Well, they kept Spider-Man off Xbox. That's a different thing
Yeah.
because nothing
I
kept
agree.
The
Microsoft
scale's
from
different,
going. Yeah, Microsoft has a huge war chest. And there's how many different licensed IP out there for superheroes. If they really want to do that, which they could still, but if that's what they really want to do is make an exclusive superhero game, they have the ability to do that. It's not the same. It doesn't equate. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, it's different in
Yeah,
terms of scale. Yeah.
Yeah, I agreed. I think that people, if you're really looking at the situation, you could definitely make a Minecraft situation in this case. And I have zero problem with that. Now, like I said, I get it where you want to say, hey, you're doing a $67 billion deal, Timmy. I want this game exclusive. I want to, be the number one place to play this. I get that mentality. I just feel like the deal with such IPs is like Guitar Hero, and there's other ways to incentivize exclusivity. And whereas if you had Call of Duty, it proved in 2013 or 2014 or 2015 when they got their marketing deal, and they had the better console or more powerful console, that all the Xbox players that were so gung ho on Xbox, they just went to Call of Duty and on PlayStation. So there is, I think, that faction that you can get right back, especially if you have something like Game Pass. So. Like for me, I just like when Phil made that tweet, I kind of feel like he was saying like, okay, and I do think this is going to play out this way. This is my peace offering here. You're going to have Call of Duty in the Minecraft situation. And I just think that they might hold their breath and hopefully that the regulators don't say, hey, what about Overwatch? Hey, what about World of Warcraft? Hey, what about, if they just keep it at Call of exclusivity and that's the big pie in the sky and they keep it at there, I think that that's a win for Microsoft. There's a way for them to kind of push this along to where they can get an agreement, because if Call of Duty is intended to be fully exclusive, you're going to have a lot of people pushing back, and you're going to have a lot of pissed off people, and you're going to have maybe if they don't make that hard line. And like I said, I am convinced otherwise that Phil tweeting like he did was saying, hey, he probably talked to people and within his organization, and they Satya, and they said, what's the worst thing to do? COD, there's so many people on COD. We prove that we're making money with Minecraft. We'll do the same here, and we can incentivize Game Pass by day one and other things like marketing and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's not the end of the deal. If this is what's going to get this to go, then do it, because I do feel if they don't get this, and they got to pay the $3 billion to Activision because that's the clause, I really kind of feel like Xbox will lose a lot of wind in its sails, because it's a huge deal. I just think there's so much potential other than Call of Duty, like I aforementioned Guitar Hero and other IPs that they can have. And just even like getting a Candy Crush revenue in there for them to build upon, even making more games. Just overall, they need this in my opinion, to fast track them to be where they want to be. And we all laughed when Phil said $2 billion, myself included. I remember I was like,
I know I did.
That's, and now let's be honest. And I've always given that to Phil. He's always been kind of like, he has great foresight. It's not crazy to think, Facebook and Google, they all see it too, and how it's going to play out and how it's going to eventually hit that number. There is going to be a day where, hey, look, Sony and Microsoft have 2 billion gamers. You know what I mean? In 10 years, think about it. It's not that crazy anymore.
Yeah, that's a great point. Gentlemen, I'm going to grab these super chats real quick, a little behind, and I want to go back to what's Tim talking about with regards to Call of Duty and the tweet, because I do want to get the panels, because we've talked a lot about that on the BRAP DM, but want to get our guest thoughts on it, kind of talk about this with the panel again. But I want to go the great Sin Vendetta with the $5 super chat says, doesn't Microsoft still need a fighting game studio? I believe they do, if I'm not mistaken, for Killer Instinct, I think. Tech Money with the $5 super chat says, would the DOJ and FTC attack an American company to the benefit of a Chinese and Japanese company? Microsoft has lots of lobbyists I'm watching with popcorn. So, Hogue, I want you to answer that.
Well, I mean, as I said, all of this at some level is about optics and politics. Yeah. And that's unfortunate, right? The law is supposed to be certain. It's supposed to be something that you can know. Microsoft and Activision, in an ideal world, would know whether this was something that would be allowed. But that's just not the way it works. It's not the way the real world works, because you do have a third party evaluating this kind of thing. So there's any number of reasons why that could be a problem or not for any of those regulators. Framing it on kind of international success terms doesn't strike me as what motivates the FTC and the DOJ at this moment in time. But it's something that could happen. It's something that you should keep track of. They're right, Microsoft has lobbyists, but I mean, everybody has lobbyists. And so it's a matter of Microsoft is an American company, but they've had their run-ins with the federal authorities, and they have been at the other end of lawsuits and antitrust regulation, and are, at the end of the day, even though they're not Facebook, Google, they're not new tech, they're not social media, who are, persona non grata in Washington, D.C. right now, they still are a $2 trillion technology company. And that has its own kind of stink to it in certain political circles right now.
It's a great point, Hogue. I want to get another super chat from Evan Board Saga, our good buddy Evan Board Saga with the $5 super chat says, I just want to know how many Segas this deal costs, because there's still time to trade. That's funny.
What's Sega's market cap? Like $4 billion?
Yeah,
so
right.
Just under 20? Just
$4.
under 20 Segas?
$4.59 for Sega. I like the mess with Everborn, because he's such a Sega fanboy and a Sonic fanboy.
Love Sega.
And he's been waiting for a good Sonic game since he's been an adult, and it's just not happened for him. So,
That's funny.
There's a bunch of companies at
Good
that
luck there,
low
buddy.
single-digit billion-dollar range, and I think Sega's one of them, but I'd be lying if I said I knew off the top of my head.
They are. I saw a list. I need to find that list again. I saw a list last week. Someone had did a list of the valuations of all these big companies, and Sega, Square Enix.
Yeah, I think Sega was a couple billion. Yeah.
Sega they're all pretty much under where Bethesda was. So
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Bethesda was a big deal. I mean, Bethesda was up there, not Activision size, obviously, as we learned.
Right. And then we got Sayanu.com with the $2.99 super chat says, what is the difference between influencer versus lobbyist? Oh, that's a interesting question.
Influencers try to manipulate the public. Yes. Lobbyists try to manipulate your representatives.
That's a great success.
Yeah, it's a great success. That's funny. So I want to go back to what Tim was talking about, this Call of Duty thing, because I'm of the opinion that, look, if Microsoft pulled the rug from under all these from the PlayStation contingent who play Call of Duty on that platform, it wouldn't surprise me. But it also wouldn't surprise me if they kept Call of Duty as a multi-plat. I think for some of the things Tim said, that goodwill, that gesture, I think that taking that away may maybe put, and I've read some articles about this. I think DFC Intelligence had an article about one of their analysts saying that it's probably in Microsoft's best interest to keep this game multi-plat. You want to protect the value of the IP. You could potentially damage that by pulling it away from PlayStation, and then also, they were saying that regulators may be looking at that as well, how pulling COD could maybe impact some of these other companies, Sony in particular. And, I wonder too, and this is something that I was just kind of thinking, off the top of my head, but, if Microsoft, and Tim mentioned this earlier, they're not done acquiring, making acquisitions, if they set this precedence of maybe, say, goodwill, if we want to call it that, where they're not taking away these big franchises, maybe that's an easier, maybe that's a long-term strategic win for them, because now it's like they set the precedent that, hey, you know what, we buy someone else, we buy and I'm not saying they're going to go out and buy Ubisoft, but we buy an Ubisoft, you know, the U.S. government's going to be like, okay, Microsoft has this precedent. They're not going to be taking all these things away from the competitors, making them hard to compete in the market. So, but I want to go to back to you actually, Hogue, because you actually broke down Phil Spencer's tweet on the Iron Lords podcast this past Sunday. It was a great perspective on his tweet and maybe kind of why he said what he said. Can you kind of dive into that again for our listeners, because you did bring up some great points. And I don't recall. Do you also think that this thing is going to be multi-plat?
I think that in an ideal world, in a perfect world for both parties, that Call of Duty would continue basically as it has been. I don't think Phil Spencer had to make a statement like he did. I think it was made in an environment that we've talked about, which is that regulated environment, understanding that right now is when the regulators are going to be focused on looking at Xbox and Microsoft and what they're doing in the future. And Call of Duty is the biggest console game on the planet. They've been on the top of the charts forever. And so if you look at that particular tweet, I jokingly say, and you read it more cynically than me, then you're more cynical than a corporate lawyer, but I'm an optimistic one. And I look at that from a positive perspective. I look at that as, first of all, two things are happening in that tweet. The first is that there are two different things that he says in the most substantive section, and people are combining them, and I don't think that's warranted. This is a very closely parsed tweet. This would have been vetted. This is not Phil Spencer on a toilet somewhere slamming out a tweet about Call of Duty and Sony. It's not how it works. So he says that they're going to abide by their contractual commitments, which we knew. In fact, we had seen emails from Activision Blizzard that were submitted formally to the SEC as part of their public filings that were emails that went out to their business partners that said, we're going to abide by all our contracts, both pre and post closing. And that's not nothing. Right? So Activision has these contracts it's entered into. Most prominently, it enters into co-marketing deals, including co-marketing deals for Call of Duty, often with Sony and PlayStation. And basically what they're saying is that that will survive. And it doesn't have to, right? A lot of contracts have breach clauses. They explain what you owe me if you breach this contract or if you terminate it in an untoward manner. And sometimes after acquisitions, the company looks at it and says, yeah, we're just going to breach that. We'll just pay the bill. We don't want that to exist because we have other ROI opportunities on our end. So we're just going to efficiently breach that contract. Microsoft has taken the opposite tack now on two major deals. With ZeniMax first, that's how the death loop situation happened. And now with Activision saying, look, the contracts are going to survive. We don't want to step on toes here. And also, hey, Mr. Regulator, we're good guys. Don't look at us like we're trying to be evil, right? And so that's the first part of that sentence. The second part is when he says, and we have a desire to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. And a lot of folks have pointed out that desire isn't a promise. That's accurate. But understand the situation is that nobody can predict the future. Phil Spencer of Xbox, CEO, Microsoft Gaming, cannot promise that Sony will enter into a deal with him in the future. And so what you can say is, look, I've talked to it on my side of things. I'm tweeting it out right now. We'd prefer it to stay the same. And I think there's any number of reasons that you can argue to justify that, even though it's different from Starfield and what they've done with ZeniMax or what they've proposed to do if the ZeniMax Bethesda games are ever released. You know, we'll see. We'll see if Starfield hits that date. I still have my doubts. They're only showing concept art. I digress. In any event, when we're talking about what Phil says here, it's different from what he said with respect to those games. And so I do think you can look at a Call of Duty and say, well, it's multiplayer focused. It sells battle passes. It sells microtransactions. It has value in the zeitgeist, in the Q score, in the advertising for big groundswells of support of gamers every single year. And so I think that there's justifications for treating them differently. And I also think that people have rightly pointed out that that doesn't mean that Microsoft won't use what leverage it can when that conversation happens, right? Whenever those contracts end and Phil walks into the room and says, hey, Sony, we would like to keep Call of Duty the same, but we're not thrilled with your 30% cut or X or Y or Z, that he can walk into the room and say, this is a very important product for you. So let's talk terms. Now, Sony on their end, strategically, would very likely be trying over this period of time to make it less strategically valuable. They don't want to be leveraged that hard. So don't be surprised if Sony tries to look at some kind of alternative, whether it's bringing back Resistance or building up a different something to fill that gap, right? Because without third parties, Sony doesn't have anything right there in that first-person shooter, certainly not modern military shooter gap that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, and you don't want to be relying on your main.
Finally.
You don't want to be relying on your main competition there.
Right.
You know, for as much as their fans have been crying for, like, not crying, I should say crying, but have been asking for SOCOM, like, it'd be like, we have a big announcement to make. SOCOM is in development immediately.
Man, I love SOCOM. Got me through law school.
I would welcome that announcement.
Now.
But, you know, they've already been investing in other first-person shooters even before this deal got done. Like, there's Firewalk Studios.
There's 2 in development right now.
Games. Yeah, like those.
Actually, more than that. I think B said 5.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, they got more than that going on, but like they've got those 2 studios in particular are making first-person shooters exclusive to PlayStation. So, like,
I think that would be great.
Yeah, they got Guerrilla Games, you know, which makes Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West have a second studio they created that's making a shooter as well.
I hope not more Killzone.
No, well,
these are just side comments from me. I never loved Killzone.
Yeah, I could do without Killzone too, Hogue.
Guerrilla has great tech. Guerrilla is a great tech company. Their stories and atmosphere bounce off me a little bit. I want to love Forbidden West. I'm looking forward to fighting some dinosaurs, but I'd be lying if I told you I found Zero Dawn terribly compelling. I would be.
Yeah, a lot of people. Meridian.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't get past Meridian. Yeah,
I beat it.
Well,
I thought the pacing was. I thought the pacing was bad. I mean, but
it's very bad. Yeah,
but that's why people don't get past Meridian, right? I mean, it's anyway. That's a digression.
No, you're right. They introduce you into a compelling story, and then they drop that story for like 12 hours with a lot of the ending kind of sucks too. But it's just like, it's that plus like a lot of tribal like nonsense that no one cares about. Like, it's all foolishness because none of these people know anything about anything, and it's just like, what was all that for 12 hours?
I tend to agree with this analysis.
Frozen Wilds. I said that's why they gave you the Frozen Wilds, which I feel is better than the main game.
Oh, the Frozen Wilds.
I've heard people say that too. Frozen Wilds better, yeah.
It's great. It's a much better focused story.
Yeah, definitely. Like and tougher too.
Yeah. No, they'd started to go into like, I don't know, quasi raid mechanics with some of those kinds of dinosaurs. I really did like Frozen Wilds. Hey, you got a point. Either way, I would love to love the Horizon brand as much as Sony's putting the resources into it. So if they can get more first-person shooters, that's definitely what you'd see them invest in, because you don't want to be leaning on someone else's control, right? Yeah. And so I think they should be doing that. I think they will be doing that. But for this interregnum period, while Xbox quasi controls Call of Duty, but is also probably bound by some contracts. That's what you're doing if you're Sony, is you're trying to figure out a way to get out of a leverage position. But ideally, I don't see any reason why Microsoft doesn't want to just run Call of Duty the way it is. Call of Duty is not Starfield. It's not Elder Scrolls. It's not a single-player role-playing game that derives its value entirely just from playing it in front of your television screen. It's a more cultural entity than that, and there's value in having it in multiple places. So for that reason, I tend to read that particular tweet in a positive fashion. The other, more cynically minded reason I also read it positively is because it would cause regulatory problems if they turned around on day one and said, we said that, but screw you, Sony. We're taking it back to our court. And so I do think that tweet is made on the understanding that the cost of reversal is higher than it might otherwise be. And because Phil didn't have to write that, there really wasn't anything causing him to write that. I do give it more credence than I'm seeing in some other corners of the internet.
That's a great point.
Is it really a reversal if Warzone remains the biggest Call of Duty like IP
great question.
Remains on PlayStation? It's not even a reversal at that point. It's like, well, we got some stuff that's exclusive because of course we own it. We can do that. But like, you guys play Warzone religiously. Warzone is still on PlayStation. Have at it. Have fun.
Warzone's not going anywhere, though. I mean, Warzone had already basically been established. They had already said, essentially, we're not breaking up any communities. So if you look at how they have parsed all of this out, in the back of my head, when they talk about communities, they talk about the ZeniMax deal. Warzone was already staying, right? Warzone is in the Minecraft camp. It's already on PlayStation. So nothing's happening to Warzone. Then that tweet comes out and you say, does it add anything to the pile? Yes. I phrase it as cynical. That might be a little bit too strong. If you want to read that as Phil just sitting back and saying, all I really promised was Warzone, baby, then you can. You absolutely can.
Is that how you would say it, Hogue?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I would love to hear Phil say it just like that. That would be great.
You know Phil enjoys the community hanging on his every word. He did have that tweet vetted, but you know he loved sending that out. He's like, oh, hey, check out what this is going to do. And he hits the button and it goes to 22,000 retweets in 6 minutes or whatever. Yeah, he loves that stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. He's a CEO. CEOs like to be known. It's fine.
Yeah. It was his most popular tweet ever.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was big news. I think that was the first time I did a virtual legality episode and had it up within an hour of the news event happening. So, I mean, that one was like, oh, this. I saw that tweet. I said, oh, okay, let's get the video tools out. I mean, it was that kind of communication. So I'm positive about it. I'm optimistic about it for gaming in general. I do think they want to look like a white knight for the regulators. I see it as a commitment to having more Call of Duty, but that could change at any time, right? The terms might not come. Sony might say, hey, we don't want it. That we're going to charge you 50%. There could be all sorts of things that happen 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. But as of right now, I think it's a legitimate posture that Microsoft would prefer to have the Call of Duty brand on the Sony PlayStation systems as they exist today, continuing with future iterations.
I think it's also interesting that if you go back to Sony's statement, they didn't even mention Call of Duty. They said all Activision games remain multi-plat.
Yeah, and they're wrong.
What did Phil say? Phil just talked about Call of Duty. He didn't say anything.
He didn't say anything about like Overwatch.
So nothing about Overwatch, Diablo, none of it. And they've announced a new survival game that Blizzard is doing. And as early as that game and develop that game is, when that comes out, that's not going to PlayStation. That's definitely just going to be an Xbox thing.
Yeah, no, I think the Call of Duty reference was deliberate. Definitely. Yeah, it's deliberate 100%. In that context to say, hey, we'll probably keep the biggest game on earth on your system, but you're not getting everything. We didn't spend $70 billion to fund your platform.
Right.
No, and doesn't it kind of sound fair? Like when you really think about it, it's like everything else should be fair game for what they want to do with it. But the biggest one out of them, we can talk about letting that stay because, like you said, that's a cultural thing.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing, and Microsoft continues. Microsoft continues to put out those press releases about the joy of gaming and that kind of thing, which are ridiculous from a business standpoint. And I tend to read them with my corporate voice when I'm doing them on my channel. But they have to stand by that in certain respects. And Call of Duty makes sense, not just to look good, but because it's liable to make them more money than exclusive. And it's important to understand that Microsoft wants to be seen as the good guy. Nothing wrong with rooting for your favorite people if you love Phil or you love the brand or whatever. But at the end of the day, they're evaluating everything on what increases the size of the pie for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's their job. But that's what's happening.
Yeah, I think Tim was trying to say something. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, no, I just had a little funny story. It's like, my wife's not really a big gamer, or she doesn't care about it at all. She knows that I'm into it, and she respects that. It's cool. But I actually had a big conversation with her about this. I explained the whole deal, and then I explained what was going on. Then I explained the Call of Duty, and she actually had a little familiarity with Call of Duty because her daughter would talk about COD. Or they would say whatever, or they would, she wasn't really, like I said, she's not the biggest gamer or whatever, or knows any stuff, but she understood that portion. So I explained the Call of Duty, and I explained the situation, what was going on. And, her answer to me struck me, to be honest, because she goes, Tim, it's not fair to take that off of the PlayStation, and they have their communities. And it kind of opened my mind to or just to look at the situation. It doesn't always have to be all cutthroat. Sure, you have to, make your case, and you have a $70 billion deal. But I just think in this case, kind of like with Minecraft, it's a strong case to make it multi-plat, and that's why I have my feelings on the subject. And I mean, like I said, a lot of people, because of how I am. Listen, if this was Starfield, like it was not exclusive, I'd be pissed. But not this. Like this is, it's understandable why you can, and like just like I said, like an 18-year-old who got into gaming that only plays COD, and there are people like that, many people, and now you're gonna say, hey, you can't play the next iteration of COD, and you got a $500 PS5, pretty much just for that, and you can't do it because you have to go somewhere else. To me, I kind of think that they are smart to just get it out there and just kind of, white knighted or whatever you want to call it, just for the optics of it. Because I do feel like if they did really try to make a hardline stance, they would get a fight, and I think that they would lose.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's interesting you bring up that perspective, Tim, because again, this is coming from the perspective of someone who doesn't have any skin in the game per se, right? Doesn't game, understands the franchise, the big community behind it because her daughter plays it, and to say, hey, that doesn't sound right because all these people have invested in these platforms, and now you're just going to pull the rug from under them, right? So that's a great point.
Yeah, that's what I kind of wanted to make, because that's just an everyday person, like you said, with no, she knew I was an Xbox fan, but she was just candid with me, and like I said, it kind of just hit me in a way, maybe that is probably the right answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's making a better business decision if that's the route that they go. And I'm sorry, to say no, Phil's not going to make a decision, so you can go make a YouTube video. He's not fueling. I want to go be able to dunk on the Sony fan base with this or whatever. No, that's not how it goes. Like you said, Tim, that could be like a long term, for all the good what they try to build. And like Hoke said, they've worked to build this, the persona of being like the good guy of the gaming industry. That would be one that would make a lot of people question. That would be one that could get some people to just reluctantly kind of turn on him. Like, nope, dig your feet in. So yeah, it's like, again, you give that one, it's sort of like a win-win because you're still going to get your money. You're going to get people that are going to come over. If you put it in Game Pass and you incentivize it, you'll get people that will come over to that. But you do have people who are they're in their ecosystem. That's where they are. They have a community over there that they're playing with. So you kind of give that one. But I think everything else is fair game. You talk, you get down into Diablo, you get down into other stuff like that. That might be where, they look, hey, this is where we're going to put the investment in the Game Pass. We're going to put the investment into the Xbox ecosystem, and these will be over here.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. That's a great point, by the way, all around. I do want to pivot here a little bit because we're getting close to the 11 o'clock hour. And, I think there's been a lot of excitement about this acquisition, rightfully so. I mean, these are exciting times. I think, Eric, I think you said that earlier, this is kind of exciting, because it's new, et cetera, And
it's not talking the power narrative. Let's move on. Let's get some new talks.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
We're finally past the power narrative. We're in some
exactly.
New stuff.
We're past that now. Yeah.
I'm not going to take offense to the fact that I already got 3 more videos planned on this. All right.
So, one of the things that I've been seeing about this acquisition, and again, listen to ILP, it was actually kind of refreshing. Listen to Colin come on. And kind of give his take on this, because I do think there's been a lot of sunshine and roses about this acquisition. I don't think I think it's fair, and I brought this up on Twitter, and of course people are like, oh, well, you never bring this up with Sony bought Insomniac. I'm like, well, that's a little bit different in terms of scope when you spend $250 million for one studio, and that's primarily developed for your platform anyway, versus 90 or 70 billion on a publisher. It's a little bit not an apples to apples per se, but again, I've seen a lot of it's all sunshine and roses and it's great. It's exciting. Yeah, it's great. It absolutely is exciting. Well, I wouldn't say it's great, but it's exciting. But I haven't seen a lot of discussion around what this means. Like, is there any downside to this? Is there a negative ripple effect to Microsoft buying giant publishers like Activision? Could it potentially hurt the industry long term? Maybe stifle creativity if they continue down this path? And we talked about monopoly, and I think Hogue, you mentioned this in your video, that while this Microsoft in the way it's structured now and this current landscape in gaming, that it's not necessarily a monopoly, but what if if Game Pass becomes so big and they gobble up all these publishers that they then make it harder for people to try to compete in that subscription space? Then there could be an issue. I think I'm paraphrasing definitely what you said, but I think that's kind of what the point you were making. Like, if there's issues, it could be long term if that happens, where they kind of corner the market in that subscription service. But what do you guys think? I mean, like, do you guys see any potential negativity or not negative, any potential issues maybe down the road? Could this hurt studios, developers, creators, if Microsoft continues down this path of acquiring these massive publishers? And we see this consolidation. We talked about consolidation earlier in the show. Is consolidation a bad thing for the industry? I don't see that conversation a lot on Twitter, and haven't seen it on many podcasts. I did see that on the ILP on Sunday, and then more recently on Sacred Symbols. But I'm gonna anybody. By the way, I'm going to open it up to the panel. Anyone who wants to chime in,
Sure,
do so.
I don't think this is really going to stifle creativity, because creativity doesn't really start or really happen that much in the AAA space anyway. Most publishers are very gun shy when it comes to doing things that are innovative or super unique, because it's not a proven commodity. They're putting multi-millions of dollars into a game, and they largely want to make sure that the ideas that the developers are putting forth that are going to implement in that game are ideas that are proven to work. When you come up with an idea that's wildly innovative and interesting and fascinating, but it's never been done before, then, like, am I going to put $100 million into that? Probably not. Now, if that project is like a AA game, a little small thing, kind of something like the small game RPG that Obsidian's doing, then okay, all right, you're doing something a little different, a little off the wall. Let's give that a shot. Okay, cool. That maybe you got like a team of a dozen developers going to work on that. Let's see how that goes. That's great. I hope it works out, but that's not going to be your big project. Your big project is a Avowed that looks very similar to what we've seen before in other Western RPGs. Your other big RPG was The Outer Worlds, which is a lot like Fallout in space. So it's AAA development is much more like that. And so when it comes to big publishers being gobbled up, that's fine. But when you come to innovation, you don't go to those big publishers, those big developers for innovation. You go to the smaller guys that end up becoming bigger developers once they get some notoriety, once their ideas take hold and people say, wow, did you play this game from this completely unknown developer, but this game's awesome, and then people want to see a sequel. Like, that's when you start to get the BioWares of the past kind of move on, and people start looking at Larian Studios.
That's a great point, Slow-Mo.
The next big RPG maker out there. Yeah, like, so it's always going to be a new studio that comes in and takes up the mantle, picks things up. So innovation will be fine.
Yeah.
Let me play devil's advocate on this.
Okay.
So let's talk about Psychonauts 2. And let's talk about Double Fine. So Psychonauts 2 gets started in development before Double Fine is purchased by Microsoft. They in fact were using Fig and some weird crowdfunding stuff that I could probably do a video on and why I don't like the terms of. But Double Fine is known for making weird stuff. They made all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yep.
you talked about bigger companies not being so terribly interested in doing weird stuff. Do you think there's any chance, do you think there's any concern that people should have? You take Tim Schafer, you put him in Microsoft, of all places, with whatever budget they're doing after they just spent $100 billion acquiring studios, and one or two of the next crazy ideas that he puts up to Phil or even to the board of Microsoft, and they say, no, can we ease that back? Let's look at something different. Phil has given all the right noises to say, hey, we bought the creative so that they could be creative. We're going to do those kinds of things. And that'll work for a time. But if we have any understanding of the history of acquisitions, there can be a time where the hand gets a little heavier and a little heavier and a little heavier with respect to these kinds of things. Do you feel any concern for Microsoft gobbling up, well, I don't know, Tango and Double Fine and various other places that have maybe made smaller stuff, weirder stuff, Arcane, and having that curtailed a little bit?
I don't, because I think that the reason why they got those developers in the first place is that they are different, and that they wanted different, they wanted diverse content for Game Pass.
Okay.
So and they also want a ton of content for Game Pass, but also not necessarily just shovelware. So they wanted say Ninja Theory makes different games than other people make, but people find Ninja Theory's games to be of quality.
Yeah.
Great to have them in there. Compulsion, on the other hand, or Undead Labs, not quite, hit on a game quite yet. But
Compulsion has not made one thing I've liked.
I don't think Compulsion has made anything most people have liked so far. I think they got 2 games under the belt. I can't remember the first one. I can't remember.
It was that Shadow game that was like a launch title for the PlayStation 4.
Yeah.
and then We Happy Few, so
right.
But I do think that for them, they're very unique in the sense that they are very much Game Pass as the platform, and that there was also that one investors call they did years ago where they said they wanted a AAA game coming out in Game Pass every quarter. And I remember we've said it multiple times on this show that when we first discussed that on this show, we were just like, are they crazy? Because you're going to have a minimum 20 plus developers to do something.
It's almost like you'd have to have
laughing.
34 developers, right? Yeah. Weird.
They are with 34 developers that all do various different things. And some of them do similar things. In Exile, Obsidian, and Bethesda do very similar things, but then some of them also do very different things as well. And I think having that diversity into Game Pass is how if you're going to keep people subscribe to the platform, you can't just have a bunch of same kind of material, because then you're only going to get a certain kind of demographic that's going to want to stay subscribed to it. So you're going to need to have some kind of different stuff that people can get into. And I think for them, they're very unique in that sense. If it was anyone else, I could say probably that Double Fine would be in trouble.
Okay.
But I think because of who they are and what they're doing, and the fact that they got them in and told them you can have all the creative freedom you want, I think if they kind of went back on that, it would kind of hurt them, their image too, and being able to get more people in, because they kind of have a reputation at this point. And if you renege on that reputation, on what you said you were going to do, no one else is going to take you seriously.
Yeah, no, they have to keep morale up. There's no question there. One of the really interesting stories is that Phil and all of Microsoft has never dealt with managing this kind of scaled enterprise in terms of content delivery on a creative level. So it'll be very interesting to watch exactly how they upgrade their management staff, how heavy of a hand they take. Some studio out of the 34 is going to be a problem child, right? That's just the nature of things. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how that goes from there. I'll tell you what, from my perspective, right? My background, for those who don't know, I'm a mergers and acquisitions lawyer. I've been doing mergers and acquisitions, venture capital, all the stuff that you either love or hate or you comment on when you watch HBO's Succession. I've been doing that from 2005 on, right? And so I generally came to that as a career because I think it's a good thing for companies to be churning and to moving money around and talent around and constantly competing with each other in these spaces. I said at the top of this, I like that Microsoft has finally decided to open up the money guns after 20 years and invest in this industry that I love so much. But on the other hand, I do look at, say, Disney, who now owns damn near everything I've ever loved, and say the one problem I have with that kind of approach is that at the end of the day, there's one board of directors and their idiosyncrasies and their purse strings that do have end say over how things feel, and that can add, even if it's high quality. Take something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It can add a certain amount of sameness across a vast scope of the content that's otherwise delivered for my consumption. And so if I have any concern, it's that Phil, who might be a great guy, has some idiosyncrasies of stuff he likes, stuff he doesn't like, stuff that's going to make sense to him, and now has 34 developers that essentially have to make him and his immediate underlings happy. And that can flatten out some of the variety. I'm a Renaissance player. I like a lot of weird stuff in my gaming diet. I like to see some stuff.
Hogue, real quick, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to touch upon the point you just made about you know what Phil likes and maybe kind of narrowing down the scope of the types of games that get developed. I've heard from some smaller developers that that's actually a concern that with you know fewer and fewer publishers to go to, that may be open to having conversations with them or be open to the kind of games they're trying to create. The less of those exist in that space, the harder it might be for them to create those games. And that's actually something I've heard from some smaller developers after this deal happened. So that's a great point you just brought up. Yeah.
Well, that's the reverse. No, not at all. That's the reverse of monopoly, right? We call that monopsony. It's when you start to collapse the number of buyers, the number of people that actually purchase things. Here, that would be platform holders, right? So if there are fewer and fewer and fewer publishers to go and sell your product to, then, well, that Game Pass deal looks a little bit worse, right? I mean, like, that's what the FTC and the DOJ could ultimately be concerned about, is saying, hey, okay, so you've killed the nascent competitor, whatever the heck Spartacus winds up being, and you've grabbed all this stuff, you've monopolized this particular market, and now you've told content developers, hey, you know that rate that we told you would potentially be on the table, that's actually, we're going to cut that in half, because where are you going to go? And so there is a concern about monopsony. There is a concern about collapsing those kinds of things. And from my perspective, we're not anywhere near that in terms of market concentration. There's still enough out there right now. But if you want to worry about this kind of acquisition run, then what you're worried about is Xbox did this and it started the race. Spent $70 billion, and now everybody looks at everything and says, whoa, okay. And when I say everybody, I'm not limiting it to Sony and Nintendo, who probably can't afford to buy most of these studios, but I'm including Tencent and Amazon and Google and every other major tech company that has seen some kind of future in gaming. Netflix, and who never makes money, but is leveraged to the hilt and always willing to spend, could just say, okay, well, we want to do gaming. Let's buy EA and Ubisoft. That's a good starting point.
I mean, they're doing gaming right now. I mean, that's kind of that's one of the more
Yeah, they're little mobile
They bought
games.
Night School. They also bought a Night School studio. They did Oxenfree.
Oh, I love Night School.
And After Party. Yeah, so they own that developer now, and Oxenfree 2 is still coming out and everything, but who knows what else Night School Studio was doing after that. I did kind of want real quick touch on something that Hogue spoke about that whole the idea that like the guy at the top, he likes certain games a certain way, and therefore now we all have to develop games this particular way to kind of appease the overlord, so to speak. Like that actually happened in Ubisoft. Is the reason why we always talk about
that happening right now?
World Ubisoft.
It's
Still happening. It's still happening because now they just kind of changed it to change the format. But there was a guy that tired Ubisoft open world format that everyone can't stand. There was a guy who is their content creative director. Well, he used to be, because he got, turned out he was also kind of a creep and they got rid of him. But alleged, right? I'm sorry, alleged creep. But he only liked games where there was tons of action, huge open world, ton of like mundane stuff to do, light on story, no women in the game. This was his format. And so all the directors at Ubisoft knew that in order to get your game approved, you had to kind of hide that you may be developing some of those things until after it got approved, or just not have them in the game at all.
Well, I mean, either way, right? Like good or bad, it's people have idiosyncrasies. So the fewer people that are evaluating these things, like some of that is going to happen, definitely.
Yeah, but it's hopefully that won't be happening there at Microsoft. But I do think it's interesting, and it may also kind of lend towards. I actually had a question I had for Tim about this, about how so maybe part of the reason why they decided to go more towards acquiring publishers instead of continuing to acquire individual developers is that Matt Booty might be a bit overloaded as it is right now. Xbox Game Studios that he oversees is 15 developers, I think, maybe 15, 16. And then, like, you said 18?
15. No, you're right. You're right.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. He's got 15 already he has to deal with. Like, you add in Bethesda, that's 8. You add in the 10 from Activision. That's a lot for one person to maintain. Well, it makes sense to me that they will go more towards publishers, and then, as they said, with ZeniMax Media, they'll continue to publish their stuff. Run everything the way they did before, because really, we don't want to enforce our culture on their culture, but also we really don't have the bandwidth to deal with this right now. So it would make sense that I don't know. My question to you is, that makes sense to you? Because it seems like they just don't have the opportunity to do anything with that.
Yes, and I also want to piggyback off that and ask questions to the panel, or especially Hogue. But yes, that there is a reason. I think that that's why they break it off the way they're breaking it off. Because I think under Phil, and he stated this, he's more of a facilitator rather than somebody who pushes their creativity. He's all for, hey, Bethesda, you ran the way you ran. You're going to keep running that way. Just keep it the way it is. And you run yourself. Matt is going to have his 15 studios. He's not going to overlook Bethesda or Activision if Activision goes through. And obviously Activision is going to be tweaked because some of the workplace stuff and stuff like that. But I do think that, and Kotick is going to be out. I do think that he wants to have a way where these big publishers work under their own autonomy, and that'll work itself out, and also not stifle creativity. Where what was Hogue's point was an excellent point, and it is a concern, and it is actually something that Jay Singh brought up to me, is that to have the collection of IPs, and this is where they can start to get in trouble, where you have these high, these huge IPs, whether it's Call of Duty, Elder Scrolls, Overwatch, even your own homegrown Halo, and you have them under one umbrella, that could, in a way, give yourself an unfair advantage and/or hurt the industry because it's only under one vision or one management, whereas all these games, these collections, if you look at the IPs now, Microsoft definitely has an advantage there. That kind of could be an argument that they can make against it. Like they shouldn't have control of all these legacy IPs and all these absolutely tremendous IPs like Call of Duty and Halo, that it's not fair to the competition. So I think that this conversation is awesome, because I do think that could actually be looked at. Or I'll put it this way: when he presented it to me, because he shoots this stuff at me, he's like, "Oh, what do you think of mobile? Oh, mobile's nothing. Xbox is 2% of the market, and they're getting destroyed. Monopoly, the third and fourth of revenue." And I had an answer. I didn't really have an answer for that. For the absolute, collection of all the IPs, that the major IPs, the casual IPs, that the grouping of it, that they have that, control, whether it be creative management or just the control of it, and the availability to make all that exclusive, gives them an unfair advantage. And I didn't really have to answer, other than maybe what you were saying, Slow-Mo, that the next real big games that come out are of the Minecraft, Minecraft variety, or the DayZ and then the PUBGs, where it's a different type of game part, and they're usually not made by a third-party developers. But I really didn't have an answer for him for that. But to have so many IPs under just one roof, where some of these IPs could all be all of them could be exclusive in a way, and then they can have that advantage. So like just the stuff that we're talking about is, it's really good, really thorough, man, and I just really good points by everyone on the panel.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this, Tim, because it's not. I feel like it's not being discussed enough. It's all, and I get the excitement behind the acquisition. It is exciting, but there could be. I mean, look, let's face it. There could be a downside to this.
Opinion. They're at the point where they're pressing their luck, or they're just at the thing. I could see them do a Crystal Dynamics because of Perfect Dark down the road, and or Avalanche, maybe do that. But I kind of foresee. I think that, to be honest, the way I look at it is that when you had Satya having a Halo sweater, and I keep always reporting. Remember when he had that, and he made this big pledge to investors?
Yeah.
That at that point forward, that Phil was tasked to make a splash, and I kind of feel like this splash will satisfy the CEO of the company, which is Satya on gaming, and obviously Xbox. That I can't really see them pushing really more forward. I shouldn't say that because they wowed me already, and I do realize that, like Hogue said it, that everyone will say the big bad Microsoft. There's every one of the Microsoft fans that I remember have all been saying to Microsoft, make this type of move. You have all this money. Show us you're serious. And obviously they did. So and I give them respect for that. But I just kind of feel that I don't think you're going to see any acquisitions soon, or I think they just want to get this put to bed and kind of get their eyes off on them, and then maybe they could sneak a couple in. I definitely think that Sony is going to be. They're gonna come up with a big one, shoot right back, and I think that it's going to be Square Enix. And that makes sense because it's looking like their games are going to be exclusive anyway. So,
Yeah.
In the sense that you had Insomniac, it's the same deal. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel that we're not in a position where, listen, if you really consider it, the big three are Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony. The question is whether Netflix, Google, Apple, Amazon are really going to challenge the big three, and what will become in that space. And for me, the wild card is what we just talked about, Netflix. I think that they would very well be the type of deal where they say, hey, we're buying Ubisoft and EA. And then once that happens, I kind of really feel like that then there'll be a run on studios. But yeah, it's really, you could argue that it's better just having these big three and not having Netflix become, first and foremost, or really kicking in, because they could be just as powerful as Microsoft. And or if Google ever really wanted to get serious, and I don't think they do, they could have really made some. Honestly, Google should have been getting Bethesda, and Google should have been getting Activision, and I don't think that they would have had a problem because they were just coming into it. But I kind of feel that in a way it's like who's going to really make that step, whether it's going to be Facebook, where this metaverse. We didn't really talk about metaverse. Go into that, but that's like supposedly the next big thing, and or how people define it. I mean, that's like I said pre-show. Like if you ask this panel 20 other people what metaverse is to them, I think you get 25 different answers. You know what I mean? That's still in this process of defining itself. But I don't really think that. Like I said, I don't think this deal is going to really impact Nintendo. It probably will maybe impact Sony a little bit, but Sony's just so strong globally. Globally, they are just, they're selling Xbox out 10-1 in certain areas. globally they have brand recognition, and they're just super strong. Xbox, has to be super strong in certain regions, but overall, I don't really feel that Sony is going to be, even if this went to COD exclusivity, even if you went that far, that you're gonna be doomsday on anything. These guys are in it for the long haul,
Yeah.
and they're all gonna be just making tons of money.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tim. I want to grab these super chats real quick before I forget them. Hope I didn't miss any here. Hold on just a second. Let me go down. All right, we got Sir X with the $2 super chat says, now Xbox owns all Call of Duty on their consoles. Thank you for that super chat, Sir X-Men. And then we got a Gamer by Choice with the $5 super chat. Thank you for the super chat. Says, it is odd that Sony can be aggressive and they are praised for being ruthless, but Microsoft is aggressive and you want them to be the nice guy. Let's see here. Hope I didn't miss one. Then we got Sanu.com with the $3 super chat. Says Xbox freedom versus PlayStation support versus Nintendo fun. Who wins? I don't know. I say we all win. I'm gonna be political. I'm gonna go with that answer. So thank you for the super chat, gentlemen. Those are great points, Tim. Slow-mo, Forte, E, do you guys have any other thoughts on the consolidation or Hogue?
I did want to say real quick, I do agree with
man.
Tim that Crystal Dynamics might be, if not Microsoft acquiring them, then someone else acquiring them, because they seem to be somewhat on the outs with Square Enix. There was some public statements that seemed very un-PR-like from Square in regards to the performance of the Avengers, and saying it was a bad fit to even have like the studio even make that kind of game, which I just thought was like, man,
Yeah.
how do you say that about a studio that you own? That seemed pretty tough. I mean, and then right after that, they are loaned out to the Initiative to work on a game that has nothing to do with Square Enix whatsoever. It just like they are also making Marvel games, the only other publisher within the industry that's really making Marvel games right now outside of Sony PlayStation. If Sony were to acquire them, like you can see Guardians of the Galaxy 2 being exclusive to PlayStation and they'll eventually come to PC or something like that. Like, it would make sense in regards to what they do already with the timed exclusives, the kind of games that they make, and also make sense with the how Final Fantasy is just kind of known to be a PlayStation kind of game. Like it's been that way since Final Fantasy 7 came out on the first PlayStation. So it would make a lot of sense to me in that like Square would want to not really wanting to keep Crystal Dynamics or not really feel a value of them the way maybe another publisher would feel like, let's go ahead and just kind of cut some fat here and make the acquisition a little bit easier. So that would make sense to me.
I just want to make a point on that, and it's interesting you brought that up. It's very real. From what I heard, that they were doing nothing, and they were like asked, like, "What are you doing?" And they were saying, "Well, we're doing nothing." And I think that's how that Phil and Xbox got them to work on it. They went to Square, and I don't think they're really on the best terms. But also, let's be honest, the DLC of Spider-Man that Crystal Dynamics, they kind of like, I think people that shit looked like it was like 2000, like with the spider senses and stuff. Like honestly, you could tell that they kind of just said, you know what, we're not putting much effort. So yeah, it looks kind of, I kind of feel like if you just put yourself in their shoes, they have the public statement, and now you're in a whole different company, and you're learning the ways of that culture or whatever, and you have all this bad PR with Square. I think Square really shouldn't have made those statements, and I kind of feel that also Crystal Dynamics shouldn't have really made that game the way that DLC, because I could really feel like they were dragging their feet on that on purpose.
That entire game should have been a single player experience. Yep. Like I do not think
agree.
The multiplayer was tacked on. Like if you play that game,
the opening's great.
Look,
Kamala Khan's story is fantastic.
Yeah, I thought it was good. Yeah, I thought it was really good.
The campaign's good. The campaign's very good. They did Kamala Khan justice. It's a good story. The problem is that like they tried to turn it into like this looter shooter, and one, that's not what Crystal Dynamics has done before. Typically, when you see a developer go out of their wheelhouse and do a completely different genre, it's normally like they create a second studio to do that, like say like how Playground Games is doing Fable. Whole second studio, they but they hire people who have experience in making those kind of games and have successes in that to kind of lead the project so that you're not making the kind of mistakes that new people to a new genre make. And then you get some stuff like Jedi Fallen Order with Respawn, where it's a major success and it's out of their wheelhouse, but they did the right thing. So they created a second studio, a second team to get it done. None of that stuff happened with Crystal Dynamics. You got a team that's completely inexperienced in this kind of stuff. And it almost kind of feels to me like where you play that campaign and the whole first, like maybe couple of hours of it is single player. And then eventually you're able to add another person. And then eventually you'll be able to add more people. It just seems like they started out as a single player game, and then at some point somebody told them, "Nah, you gotta make this a
yeah."
shooter.
It does feel like that. Yeah.
And then the president of Square is like, I don't know what they were doing. Why they did that?
Exactly.
It's like, we just threw them under the bus. It's like, come on, man.
Like they probably like, we didn't even want to make that kind of game.
Right. And, you know,
this is crazy. Yeah.
And you know what's funny about that too is like, 'cause, like I remember like, you know, the anger and the vitriol around like that Spider-Man thing being like exclusive or whatever, and then I think when people saw it, they were like, "Whew, dodge that bullet." It was like no big deal. And Tim, one of the funniest lines I heard around that was Chris Raygun on Sacred Symbol said it looked like somebody made a Spider-Man game about a Times Square Spider-Man. he's just riding around hitting people with silly string.
Man, I saw that when the spider senses went up, and it was just like those. Like if you look at it, it's so funny, man. I was like, oh man,
I was like, wow. It's like all this time, and this is what it. Oh wow. Like you said, it's like the animation, it's like that bad TV show, 70s Spider-Man.
The animation of Spider-Man in the Avengers using his webs looked like a yoga instructor or something. It was just like, it was so bad. I'm just like, yo, like I'm so glad I got that game on PC. I did enjoy playing the campaign. The campaign was fun. The Avengers Initiative, the stuff that the post game content really fell flat for me. I just couldn't deal with it. It was just way too redundant, and not the gear. Still, like it just like so much of that didn't make sense. Like you get this gear and you can't see it. Like the Incredible Hulk, upgrade for him is his spine in a rib cage. Like what? Like none of the upgrades are visible. And like, and as a fan of looter shooters, like when I get some like awesome legendary gear, I want to see it. Like I want to see what I just got. Like I just grinded for. I want to see it on my character. I want to see the weapon or whatever. You don't see any of that stuff. It's just like, it's so completely opposite of what people expect from that genre. It's just, it should have never happened. But to go back to them kind of potentially getting rid of Crystal Dynamics, that's the one studio in the past 5 years that's made a Marvel game that stunk. So you get rid of them. Maybe Eidos Montreal does the next Avengers game. Or maybe they do the next Guardians. But you know, Eidos Montreal can do a good Marvel game. You saw it with Guardians of the Galaxy. And so maybe that is kind of the lane that they go in going forward. Who knows, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
Well, yeah. Well, I got to say, wrapping up the show with Spider-Man was actually pretty funny. Go ahead, E.
No, I was just saying, that whole thing when that revealed, I was like, that's not real. I was like, who made that?
Who made that? Oh my god, that's so funny.
Anyway,
yeah. Well, look, we are past the 11 o'clock hour. First of all, I just want to give a big shout out to everyone in the live chat. Thank you all for stopping by, hanging out with us. Please hit that like button, by the way. And if you're new to the show, subscribe and hit that bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. Also, please check out the link for Hoag's channel at Hoag Law, Virtual Legality. I put the link down here in the description section so you can see that and go to his channel as well. Great content. Want to thank everyone here on the panel. Also, big thank you to our guest here, Tim. Long overdue, man. We gotta get you back again on the show sooner than later, man. Like, because I do feel like it's been a long time.
Whenever you want, when we have some stuff to really go into that makes a lot of sense. I'm always here. This is a great show. I mean, learned a lot today. Panel is absolutely fantastic. I love when I go on a podcast and I learn stuff. And I could say, obviously, today that was one of those days. And just shout out to everyone on the panel. And yeah, whenever, like I said, just hit me up in DM and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Definitely appreciate the time, man, as always. And then Hogue, look, man, always you have been busy this week, for the last week actually. So certainly appreciate your time and really always appreciate your insight. I mean, I'm a big fan of your channel because you just have a certain level of insight that many of us don't have just because of the professional work that you do. And it's awesome. It's great that you actually take time to share that with us because, I always feel like, we need more people that have industry knowledge and can provide insight because I think, unfortunately, we get hot takes sometimes and those aren't always accurate, to say the least, or maybe don't come from a position of knowledge. But thank you again for coming on, Hogue. Certainly appreciate it. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah, no, and that's the nature of the thing, right? People have opinions. It's great that people care about this industry so much. That's what I love about it myself. So, given my background, I was looking at this a few years ago and said, hey, I can talk a little bit more about what's happening and why with contracts and everything. Now, 3 years ago, I didn't know we were about to enter the era of video game consolidation and some of the craziest stories we'd ever seen. But that certainly helped the channel's growth, and I'm happy to be out there, hopefully informing, educating, and entertaining folks about business and law. So thank you very much for having me. And yeah, please do check out Virtual Legality. We're talking about this kind of stuff literally all the time.
Yeah, definitely check out Hogue's channel. It's really insightful. I really encourage everyone in the live chat to do so if you haven't done so already. Also want to give a big shout out to the BRAP guys here, Eric Jackson, Forte, Slow-Mo, always a pleasure, man. Always appreciate your insight. If you want to let people know where they can find you, go ahead, let them know. But thank you again, man.
No, thank you, man. Good show, a lot of great information. Just want to say thank you to Tim and Hogue for being on. Tim, always good to talk to you. Same with you, Hogue. Appreciate you guys. But you can find me on Twitter, EC Jackson with an X. And find me around there goofing off.
Forte is Slow-Mo. Gentlemen, you have a show tomorrow. DPS podcast. Yes, DPS podcast.
Tomorrow, Thursday?
Devil Kill.
Oh,
what? There's a show tomorrow. Yeah, there is. You know what? You're right. We do have a show tomorrow. Yeah,
you guys have a show.
Eastern, 9 p.m. Eastern on my channel, Slow-Mo Backslap, Damage Per Second podcast. Me and Forte going to get into,
that's what it means.
Things. Yes, damage per second. It's kind of like a play on like RPGs and looter shooters. How much DPS do you have? Sometimes in some games, if you don't have enough DPS, they kick you out of the party. They check your stats.
That is true. Like, that is true. By the way,
he ain't got a Gallahorn.
He ain't got a Gallahorn. Get him out of
here. Forte. Let me just interrupt real quick. You think Forte's kidding?
Oh no, it was real.
If you didn't have a Gallahorn. And you were playing the Crota raid.
Yeah.
You couldn't play.
You can't play with us. You can't play with it. Look,
you don't have a Gallahorn? You can't do Crota.
You need to go get your RNG up.
Yeah,
it's like that for a lot of games. Looter shooters. Or look at in the division. If you weren't running
no last word, you gotta go.
Sets. Nah, fam, you gotta get up out of here.
So what you say? There's a limit on community.
Yes, basically. Yes. Community goes so far based on what weapons you have in your DPS.
Right. But over on DPS podcast, we will not kick you out if your DPS is too low. We welcome everyone to come join us tomorrow 9 p.m. Eastern on my channel. We're going to have some fun with the topics and everything, so it'll be a good time. Yeah, that's it. Great show. I know it looks like Tim had to drop, but Hope, appreciate you coming through. Good to talk to you again and learn a lot about this law stuff and how it affects the industry, man. I'm always learning something. Like I see a Hope video, I'm like, yeah, let me go sit down and find a quiet place to actually check this out so I can actually learn something. So I appreciate you coming through, man.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for the kind words.
No
Hey,
problem.
Slow-Mo, shout out to you and Forte for not just being on Spotify now, but also being on iTunes.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Oh yeah. We did get that done. We had to finagle a way to get on there.
Oh yeah, I had to do some research.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't happening. It wasn't happening organically.
Did you?
No,
did
not
you,
at all.
It
No.
wasn't
You had to work. You had to work it like xCloud, like get the
Oh,
workaround.
man.
did you tell him? Did you tell him you had a Gallahorn?
Had to go through the browser. Yeah, man, it's a good show, man. Someone already said everything about the show for tomorrow. Check out the channel, Gaming Forte everywhere, YouTube, Twitter, Xbox Live, PlayStation. I'll also be on Game On Daily this Saturday. So, Saturday, 4 p.m. Come check us out over there. It's going to be a good time. First time on that show. But yeah, man, it's been a crazy last week and a half, and trust me, it's gonna get crazier the more we get into the rest of the year. And we haven't even gotten to the games yet, y'all. The games are coming next month.
Oh, right.
Next month,
Just
really.
think about that. We
Yeah,
talking
next
about
month
stuff
kicks it
that
off,
we can't even tangibly do yet. Wait until we get to the games next month, man. That's what I'm looking
I've been
forward
enjoying Extraction. I really have.
to. What?
I've heard, Hogue, I've heard a couple people say that.
What? I can't see when Hogue says something like this. I really have
Hogue-
to
Hogue-
ask him a
Hogue
question.
also
'cause
thinks
this is the same person that said Mass Effect
Yes,
2
thank
is
you.
the worst game
No,
of all of them.
he also thinks Andromeda is the best of the Mass
Yeah,
Effect games.
exactly. So I have to
He
question.
didn't
both of
say
those
the
statements-
best.
Both those
He didn't
statements
say
are
the
false.
best. He said Andromeda was the second best. I think he
Oh,
said
I'm
second
sorry.
best, right?
No. He said Andromeda was the best.
I did not.
What did
He
you
didn't
say?
say Andromeda. He said
He said
Mass
Andromeda
Effect
was the
1 was
second best, and the first one is the best.
Yeah.
But look,
yeah.
I was in the debate on the Iron
was
Lord
there
channel
too, and I tuned it out.
with Lord Hogue. We
I like
Hogue,
how this
I
comes
get
up
into
in
it.
every podcast.
I know, Hogue. Hogue, I thought we were gonna go this entire podcast without bringing up Mass
No.
Effect.
All I said was I've been enjoying Extraction. I don't know what that has to do with Mass
And then I had to
Effect.
question you because that game is horrible.
Extraction's horrible. I disagree. I mean,
can't.
look.
The
I don't know
game-
what its
it
longevity
literally
is.
like if they would have kept the gameplay, I feel like Rainbow Six had, and not changed the way that it feels when you move around and shoot a gun, I would think it would be better. But the fact that they changed it, it just doesn't feel good.
Well, so let me give the caveat that I'm not
Okay.
a siege. I'm not a siege player. I don't play Rainbow Six Siege.
Okay,
So,
there's the
I got Rainbow Six. I played it. It's on Game Pass. What a value, am I right?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I downloaded it. I played it. I enjoyed it with my brother. It's got a bunch of hooks that I like, and I'm more of a PvE guy than a PvP guy. So hey, look, all I'm saying is the price is right for entry if you've already got Game Pass, and you're not going to kick it off your Xbox. It's not too bad.
The question is,
I might have
this,
to
if
check
it
this
wasn't
out,
in
Hope.
Game Pass, if it wasn't in Game Pass, would have been on your radar to play.
It wasn't even on my radar. I didn't even realize it was coming out. So no.
A
Okay.
lot of
Game
people.
Pass did something.
So expectations always matter when we talk about these kinds of things, right? So I looked at, I vaguely remember it being advertised. My expectations were on the floor, right? I had no expectations for this game whatsoever. So it comes out and it nicely surprises. Hey, that wasn't so bad. You played a little bit more, and I wound up playing, a number of hours over the weekend. And quite enjoyed it. Like a satisfying video game session. Will it last forever? I doubt it. But I enjoyed it enough.
Yeah, I'll give the one thing I will give the pass because he clarified the situation. I do think me being a person that enjoys Rainbow Six in general, just the base game. When I saw it, I was excited because I was kind of tying just the gameplay, the atmosphere, and like trying to convert that over to what they were doing when it comes to like alien invasions and stuff like that, clearing rooms.
Wrap it up, Forte.
I was thinking that's how I was gonna see it the way I played it. I was like, so maybe I just need to go back and give it a try again. I think the fact that I haven't played it with somebody else might be part of the problem too, because I
That's
do hear
probably
it
it,
is
man.
better if you're playing with other people.
Yeah, it's remarkably good at solo for what it is, but it is better with even a twosome. They do a
Right.
pretty good job of scaling, but even two people is better than just the solo experience. Definitely.
Okay.
Nice.
I
Alright, you
I,
gotta
I'm gonna have to
I
check
played
this
the
out now.
solo. I streamed it. I gotta keep it real. I almost fell asleep. I was streamed it for like an hour and a half, and I was like, man. I said to my chat, look, guys, look, if it sounds like I'm about to fall asleep, it's true. I need to switch to something
Well,
else.
I think you were going to fall.
Start...
I don't think that helps your case either, because you tend to be tired during the day.
Oh man.
Okay, but that game wasn't helping at all. It was virtual digital NyQuil for me.
Look, all I'm saying is I downloaded it. I enjoyed my session. If you wind up like me, congrats. You also enjoyed your video game session. If you didn't, all I can give you is my opinion. I enjoy Extraction.
Makes
Nice.
sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I'm going to have to check this out now. All right, everyone. Thank you again, everyone in the live chat, for hanging out with us. Big shout out to Tim Dog, who had to
Did you get
leave.
eJack already?
Yes, I did get eJack. Yes.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, I didn't forget. No.
We need to make sure the podcast stays intact.
Yes.
Thank
No.
you, Forte.
No, I got it.
We can't be losing our free agents.
Yeah, we can't have Eric
No.
going on his free agent tour again.
No, we're not
He was
doing that.
touring all the podcasts.
Yeah,
You know,
we're
it
not
was a
doing
lot.
that.
It was a lot of suitors too. People were,
Yeah.
offering,
Taking
snacks
his
and
talent
stuff.
somewhere.
Yeah.
But no,
For DM and everything, man.
yeah. But no, thank you everyone again. We'll catch you all next week. Enjoy the rest of the week. Have fun gaming.